All right, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Bibbidi bobbidi boo. I got a show for you. Bibbidi bobbidi bee. You guys are here to watch me. I got a light stream right here. I think I got to resolve that. Hold on 1 second. 1 second. Bibbidi bobbidi boo. Is that coming through here? Yeah, it is. Crisis averted. We solve problems here at the Canadian Commie. Okay. Oh, wow. Wow. I am, to put it mildly, flipping exhausted. This weekend, was what I've been calling the entire time suspiciously hot. It was very, very warm, and it seems as though everybody I talked to, nobody I wanted to talk to, wanted to actually address the deadly seriousness of, hey, have you noticed how hot it is? The climate crisis is having the predictable effects that it's warming everything up. That it's warming everything up, right? And it looks like Canadians are just going to walk around going, oh, wow, it's still warm. Oh, well, goodness, it's so warm, isn't it? It's such a beautiful day. You know, it's a beautiful day. You should get out there. You should enjoy the sunshine, you know. It's October 3rd. You know, it's October now. And it feels like it's August, you know. Though the leaves are changing color already. We're supposed to get into that crisp fall weather, and it's just not happening. Right? It's pushing back later and later. You can feel it. You can literally feel it. You've got to be daft to just be like, oh, I guess it's just a nice day today, you know? DJ, good to see you. Yeah. And it's going to get worse, right? It's going to get worse year over year, and we're all just ignoring it. Eric, good to see you, my man. U.S. heat deaths will soar. Eric says, John, I have to say the part I look forward to the most for your stream nowadays is when you decide to read Project 2025. I've got that right here. We're going to start that later on. Because this is wild. This is wild. For those of you who don't know, right, this is the 2025 Mandate for Leadership. This is what comes out of the conservative. It's not technically the Republican Party in the United States. It's not technically the Republican Party, but it's definitely like in the heart of all of that. It's the major players are the Heritage Foundation, and their goal is to make this a document that gets adopted by the president. We've been reading through it, and it is psychopathic. It's absolutely insane. Full of, I think my favorite thing is that it's got no solutions at all. Like, it's a lot of really hard rhetoric, a lot of really big condemnations, a lot of big sweeping statements with absolutely no solutions whatsoever. And then when they do come out with solutions, they are wildly psychotic. Like, just madhouse nutty shit that any society that actually implemented it, like every other country in the world, would look at it and be like, oh, you guys are fucking Nazis. Oh, okay. Yeah. Speaking of Nazis, the Nazism story continues. I think I'll be making a short video, a more condensed video on this subject, so I won't bang on too much about it. Although it's like what most of the links are all about. Our entire media has geared itself towards Nazi apologism at this point. That oh, sure, they honored a Nazi, right? Sure, they honored a Nazi, but that's not so bad, right? Literally the CBC article, right? There's literally a CBC article out here right now that says, the Hunka affair has embarrassed Canada. How bad is it historically, really? As bad as it is, the experts say Canada has experienced worse. So just literally hand-waving, just straight up like, oh, sure, it's bad, but, you know, it's we've done worse things. Here are some examples. And then when you look at their examples, it's things like, oh, some Israeli spies following a failed assassination attempt were caught with Canadian passports. That's just as bad, right? That's the same as taking a literal Nazi and honoring him as a war hero in the Canadian Hall of Parliament, right? That's the same thing, right? There was a mining agreement. There was an international. To another miscalculation. In 1935, a Canadian proposal to place oil sanctions on fascist Italy collapsed because the Canadian diplomat who proposed it failed to get the federal government to buy in. Mackenzie King's government soon disavowed it, right? So dysfunction, right? Like a little bit of miscommunication. I'm sure it involved fascist Italy, I guess. Like didn't put oil sanctions on fascist Italy. That's the same as honoring a literal Nazi in the middle of your parliament, right? That's the same. We can forget all about this, right? We could forget all about this. We don't need to pay so much attention to this anymore, you guys. Not a big deal. Not a big deal. Honoring a literal Nazi in the highest level power structure that exists in your society. No problem whatsoever, right? We just hand wave it all away. Grinning, good to see you. Weather has been nicer in Pittsburgh. Yeah, of course. It's gonna be nice for a minute, and then it's gonna be really not nice. Isaac, good to see you. Yeah, Chrystia Freeland with Hillary Clinton to talk about human rights abuses by Russia. What a cartoon show it is, eh? Like, what a cartoon show this all is. It's so comical to watch these total fucking psychopaths actually come together and attempt to talk seriously about an issue that they have no reason to chime in at all. Like, Chrystia Freeland and Hillary Clinton, are you kidding me? Like, Hillary Clinton is like instrumental. She's one of the major players in the destruction of Libya. Like human rights. Like why does Hillary have the right to stand up and say even word one about human rights? What a joke. Let's play Millennial Monopoly, right? Content says talk seriously about BOFA. I don't know what BOFA is. Grinning says there's a few pieces in the media essentially saying, well, he might have fought with the Nazis, but that doesn't mean he is a Nazi. Oh yeah, it's this, right? Yeah, oh my God, such a bad look. His unit was associated with mass murder, right? Another form of Nazi apologism, right? Like, just because you fought against... Content. I am trying to do something serious here, Content. We are talking about Nazis. Going in with a Bofa D's nuts joke. Sir. And I just walked right into it. I completely walked into it. What's Content talking about? Content, I don't know what Bofa is. What meme are you talking about here, Eric? Oh yeah, let's play a game of Millennial Monopoly. The rules are simple. You start with no money, you can't afford anything, the board is on fire for some reason, and everything is your fault. Fantastic. Like, it's true though. We're in a state right now. Yeah, here it is. Half of millennials and Gen Z living paycheck to paycheck in Canada while stressing about climate crisis. Big flippin' surprise here. Struggling under the rising cost of living and an ever-mounting fear of the climate crisis, young Canadians don't see a positive future for themselves right now, according to a recent national survey. So that means that the policies that are on the table and what we've been doing is working, right? That the goal... stated openly, the goal is to make things worse for Canadians. Or the Bank of Canada has the Bank of Canada has said so. The goal is specifically to make things worse. So it's working, right? Their policies are working. The survey, which interviewed 1,508 millennials and 1,507 Gen Z adults, eat it, Gen Z. Millennials are better represented in your survey. Haha, eat it. Found that half of young Canadians live paycheck to paycheck. and that half also believe that we see the environmental situation deteriorate in 2024. 1 in 10 young Canadians said they wouldn't feel comfortable bringing children into the world in a climate crisis. I can't imagine why the population is in decline, right? The results of Ledger's annual youth survey were laid out in a report published last week, painting a bleak picture of the life that young Canadians are experiencing and anticipating. The situation is getting worse with each passing year. Gen Z and millennials lack confidence in the future, the report said. There was also a sharp divide reflected between the financial anxieties of homeowners versus those renting, with nearly 3 out of 4 renters stating that their rent takes up too much of their expenses, while less than half of homeowners said the same about their mortgage payments. Out of the 3,015 people surveyed, the majority were predominantly English speakers, 65%, and 36% belonged to a visible minority. The survey was carried out between July 25th and August 7th. Although the boundaries of different generations are sometimes disputed, the survey considers millennials to be anyone born between 1981 and 1996, while Gen Z contains anyone born from 97 onwards. Fear of an unlivable planet and an unviable future. Climate anxiety was one of the recurring themes of the survey, with 60% of participants saying that they were concerned about the impact of climate change, up from 53% in 2022. Women were more likely to be concerned about the environment than men, with 56% of women answering that they believe the situation will get worse in the coming year, compared to just 43% of men. Around 67% of respondents said that they believe that major upheavals, such as war, vast migrations of populations, natural disasters, and etc., are imminent. Only 15% disagreed with that statement, with the remainder saying that they didn't know. More than half of young Canadians agreed with the statement that the generations preceding them are directly responsible for climate change, with 55% of Gen Z agreeing compared to 50% of millennials. Gen Z were more likely to be optimistic about new tactics for handling the climate crisis, with 57% stating that they believe new technologies will allow us to limit the effects of climate change, compared to just 49% of millennials who said the same. The survey reflects a growing sense of powerlessness among the nation's youth. While more than half of Canadians already reported feeling unable to help solve society's problems in 2022, that percentage increased to 62% in the 2023 survey. The increase was sharper among Gen Z. When asked if they agreed or disagreed with the statement, "I'm confident that our generation will do what it takes to meet the challenges of our time," the respondents were split, with 40% disagreeing and 41% agreeing. The remaining respondents chose "I don't know" or "I prefer not to answer." But when looking at the percent who said they were confident in their generation, the survey found that even though more Gen Z agreed with that statement compared to millennials, that agreement was weaker than the previous year, falling to 44% compared to the 50% who agreed in 2022. Only 39% of millennials said they were confident their generation could meet the challenges of our time, down 4 points from 2022. When it came to mental health, more Gen Z adults stated that they had experienced anxiety in the past year compared to millennials, with 60% and 54% respectively. Only 17% of respondents stated that they had never experienced anxiety. There were glimmers of hope. 66% of young Canadians agreed that they do feel generally happy in life, and only 32% said that they weren't bothering to save for retirement because they couldn't picture themselves achieving that in the future. I love it. That's a happy note, according to CTV, right? 32% are not even bothering to save, right? Big achievement. 32% of the society, and we're all being like yippee about that. Oh, it's only 32%. Yeah, that's great. And although climate anxieties are higher than ever, it seems the largest group of respondents said they disagreed with the idea that we aren't capable of limiting the impacts of climate change. Around 45% stated they disagreed, while 37% said they agreed and were not capable, and 18% said we didn't know. I love this idea. We're perfectly capable of causing the problem, but we are not at all capable of resolving the problem, right? That's what I love about it, is that, of course, humans have the ability to create climate change, but yeah, we can't just stop polluting, right? We can't just stop doing the thing that's causing the problem, right? Look, good to see you. Mikhail, good to see you too. Financial straits getting worse. And honestly, the reason why I'm reading this, like, I'm so sick and tired. Like, there still is a section of the populace, about 20% of the populace, the psychopath class, that actually still listens to these, like, Peterson, Shapiro, the dumbasses, the stupidest people in the room. They're still listening to these people as they're saying things. You just need to work harder and try better. Like, literally 50% of the society is living paycheck to paycheck. The just get a job crowd needs to outrageously, at a high level, shut the fuck up. Like, we're at a point now where saying that is no longer just cringy and embarrassing, but stupid and dangerous. Like, you are literally saying to somebody who is experiencing a house fire that you just need to go to bed, right? You just need to get better sleep in the middle of the house fire. And articles like this need to be more widely spread and more widely understood and more widely discussed so that the people who are walking around saying, just get a job, learn to, I know they don't feel shame. I don't think they're capable of shame or embarrassment, but they learn to not say that dumb shit out loud in front of people, right? We need to start, like, throwing pies in these guys' faces when they start saying this kind of stuff. We need to start, like, making them feel uncomfortable to say that dumb shit out loud in public. In 2023, 51% of young Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck, up 48% in 2022, the survey found. That's a failure of your society. It is a high-level systemic failure, and to call it anything else is to either be complicit or so stupid that you need to keep your mouth shut. And it's worse for millennials than their younger counterparts. Around 54% of millennials stated that they live paycheck to paycheck, compared to 48% of Gen Z. More millennials consider their personal finances to be in poor shape compared to Gen Z, with 32% and 25% respectively. But young Canadians are trying to save. 71% said they had at least one type of savings or investment currently, including tax-free savings account, stock, real estate, virtual currencies, and others. Only 33% of respondents said they weren't afraid of running out of money. The rising cost of living is pressing on young Canadians' minds even more than last year. 48% said that they feel the added costs on regular payment of their credit card bills, compared to 40% in 2022. I just kind of glossed over this, but I got to go back on it. Only 33% of respondents said they weren't afraid of running out of money. So 33% of respondents are fine. 51% are not. Your society is a failure. There are no laws. There are no rules. You don't need to follow anything. Do what you need to do to make it through. And if somebody says that what you're doing is wrong, tell them to shut up. Because there's no laws or rules that you need to abide by. There's just men with guns on their hips. That's all it is. The percentage of respondents saying they had changed their spending habits due to increased costs jumped up at least 5 points in every category compared to 2022. Almost 3 out of 4 respondents said they were changing their habits in respect to saving money due to increases in the cost of living. 68% said they had changed their food habits. For the vast majority of the items listed, women and respondents from English-speaking Canadian provinces are more likely to have changed their habits because of the rising cost of living, the report stated. The wealth divide reflected in the question of home ownership. I mean, we need to abolish these landlords, right? Like, the whole concept that we should just have landlords is the dumbest shit I've ever heard, right? Yeah, subscribe, baby. We shouldn't bet our future on technology that doesn't exist yet. Yeah, especially when that technology will simply be inferior to nature itself. Like, this is how I know that we are a dead end. That humanity is an evolutionary dead end, right? we hope that there will be signs of intelligent life somewhere in the universe. So far, we haven't found any, because we're too stupid to recognize that the Earth created us. The Earth created the ecosystem for us to exist in and live in. The Earth is completely capable of healing itself. It doesn't need our assistance. It doesn't need our technology. It doesn't need us to create anything. It created us. Very straightforwardly. That all we have to do is stop. That's quite straightforwardly. All we have to do is stop this pollution. Stop all this dumb fuckery. Don't let Taylor Swift take another jet somewhere. Don't let Jeff Bezos keep shooting rockets at space. Don't let people continuously pollute for no reason, right? But we're too stupid for that, right? That's what we're watching. We're watching the decline of Western civilization out of complete and total stupidity. That I had a moment where I was willing to not call it stupidity, right? I had that moment, but after this weekend, I'm back on the stupid train. I'm really back on the stupid train. Like, everybody just walking around being like, boy, howdy, it sure is hot today. Oh, it's a really nice day, isn't it? Super hot. Yeah, it's just really nice, though. You got to get out there and enjoy the weather while you got it. Yeah, have a nice time. Right? We are a deeply, deeply, deeply detached and stupid people. And honestly, everything that's coming for us, we deserve it. We deserve it. Like, we deserve all of it. We deserve all of it. We are too stupid. We should not have the superpowers that we have. We should not have access to oil. We should not have access to any of this stuff. And it is going to destroy us, and we deserve it. Like, we absolutely deserve it. And should an intelligent life form show up, hopefully they'll take a look at the history of humanity and be like, oh, okay, so if you fuck around, you find out, right? That would be what an intelligent life form would do, is that they would show up and be like, okay, we exist in a superstructure that obviously created us, very obviously created us, that is far more powerful than we are, obviously. And there are just rules, right? Just very simple, straightforward rules that you have to abide by. And if you don't, the system will turn on you and will wipe you out. Humanity got wiped out. So just don't, right? Just don't. Real easy, right? Real easy, straightforward shit. But we're too dumb for that. Like we get too attracted to glittering objects, and we get caught up in our own imagination about what we are. Right? That we have created an imagined version of ourselves that is so... I think Mikhail sort of nails it here. We've been playing dumb for so long, we're just dumb now. Right? We get caught up in this idea of what we are that we don't actually look at what we are. Right? So, the wealth divide reflected in the question of home ownership. To assess the finances of young Canadians, a portion of the survey split them up by their living situation into homeowners, renters, or those still living with family. Renters overwhelmingly expressed more difficulty meeting their rent requirements than homeowners did meeting their mortgage requirements, underlining how different the financial considerations are of those who can afford homes and those who can't. Around 72% of renters said their rent takes up too much of their expenses, and 81% said they're renting because they're unable to buy property. Another 67% said they don't think they'll ever be able to buy property in the next few years, with 68% of youth living with family stating the same. Again, another complete sign of the total systemic failure of your society. There are no laws. You don't need to feel obliged to follow them. 1 in 4 renters said they'd have to move because of a rent hike. Meanwhile, 61% of homeowners said their mortgage wasn't too high compared to their salary, and 77% they have never needed help to pay their mortgage before. Homeowners were far more likely to say they're confident in their financial knowledge at 67% compared to renters at 48%. Young Canadians prioritize salary in employment. Oh, yeah, pay us. Pay us for our labor, right? Pay us for our labor. Juan, good to see you. Vladimir, good to see you. As if, good to see you. The percentage of young Canadians planning to quit their job in the next year is slightly higher than last year, at 15% compared to 2022's 13%. but is still far below the 25% planning to quit in the 2021 survey. The difference between millennial and Gen Z is stark here, with 22% of Gen Z adults planning to quit in the next year compared to just 11% of millennials. Out of the 272 respondents who stated that they wanted to quit their job, 50% said it was because they would like a salary increase. One reasoning, which saw a big change compared to last year, was the complaint regarding flexibility in work hours. In this recent survey, 19% of Gen Z respondents planned to quit their job, saying they didn't have enough flexibility, down 39% in 2022. This iteration of Ledger's youth survey added a section which presented participants with hypothetical scenarios in order to figure out which aspects of a job were prized most highly by young Canadians in the job market. Respondents were given a set of scenarios relating to salary, vacation hours, employee benefits, work hours, place or work, and other miscellaneous work conditions, and were asked to select the combination they would most likely to accept in a job offer. The report stated the respondents placed the most importance on salary. Yeah, no shit. Like, no shit. Like, people are expecting us to work these jobs for free. Like, I had a conversation with somebody not that long ago who was just dead set and just absolutely trying to convince me that people who stock grocery shelves should not be paid a living wage. And I just said to him, like, so how do the shelves get stocked? Who does that? And he just didn't have an answer because he's stupid, right? Because we're just so stupid that we don't actually we pretend like we understand things. We pretend, but at the end of the day, we're just paying fealty to this death cult that's actually teaching us to despise one another, right? One of the things, I've got this really great article here that really, please support our annual fund drive. How do I get rid of you? How do I get rid of you? Can I get rid of you? Other? What happens? There you go. And then, no, go away. All right. The lesser of two evils is a democracy for psychopaths. And the culture is going full-blown psychotic. I mean, you can see this with all the Nazi shit going on and all the Nazi apologetics. At what point do people have enough of this? We still keep going to work. We're at the end of the Monopoly game. That's why organization is what it takes. We've got to get together, right? Like, if you walk off your job, then you get replaced. If everybody walks off the job, then it's a major problem. That's what this is going to take. It's going to take major action collectively by the people for it to be responded to at all. Because we're ruled by desperate psychopaths who are getting off on the idea of causing us suffering. And it's not going to be resolved. It's just simply not going to be resolved. Eric says, I was watching a video today where the guy was talking about the natural cycle of warming and cooling of the global. Yeah, tell me you're illiterate without telling me you're illiterate. This is normal, completely normal. Absolutely no evidence of my claim, but I'm just going to say it anyway. What is different with climate change crisis? We're actually putting the same level of CO2 and methane 8 ice age ago. I don't know what you mean, bud. Yeah, New York was flooded this past week. It's a down payment on the future, for sure. Yeah, number go up. It seems that all of Western civilization's been reduced down to one number. Number go up. That's it. Line go up. Line go up good. That's it. Forget about the fact that you're like poisoning your land and your air and your water and grinding up your children's future in order to make line go up. But line went up, so congratulations. Paycheck to paycheck, war to war. Oligarchs, if we have to live war to war, you have to live paycheck to paycheck. Absolutely. I don't really like surveys like this generally. It's all based on feelings, perceptions, not facts and reality. There's a lot of talk about fear and anxiety. Like, that's what they're quantifying. Yeah, but I think it counts, methane. Like, I understand what you're saying, but, like, it pays that, like, people are experiencing something and they're talking about it, right? Like, and it's one of those things where, like, Does it actually quantify like the hard data of what's going on? No, but it would be like we're noticing it. Like that's what that was all about, is that we're noticing it. As if says we. I'm nothing like all these dumb fucks and psychos out there who caused all this. Granted, I rejected the system and now I suffer. Yeah. I mean, that's what we're all doing, right? Like, we're all just making the decision to try to participate as little as possible, right? Hello to you, Vladimir. I've been looking into the state of fusion technology, and it's nowhere near close enough. Even some of the required elements of neutron breeding are very rare. Yeah, and they want us, like, take a look at what happened with AI, right? Like, AI is going to have an impact for sure, but, like, they're all just salesmen. Like, it's just a culture of salesmen. They're all just selling us products, right? And they all just want us to buy their products. That's what it's all about. Didn't Homo sapiens make the Neanderthals go extinct when Homo sapiens realized they were just a little bit smarter than them? Perhaps the universe is retaliating for destroying our cousins. Yeah, I think there is a... I think that there's a check in the system, right? That the check in the system is, are you smart enough to bend the knee to the universe itself? Like, that's really what it is. That the universe is more or less fine if you gallivant around and do things and cause problems, right? But and it doesn't seem to care if one group meets another group and the one group destroys the other group. It doesn't seem to care about that, right? That what the universe cares about, because as far as the universe is concerned, that's just men and mankind dealing with itself, and okay, whatever, right? Like that's it. It doesn't matter to the universe at all. That the only thing the universe does seem to care about is, are you going to respect the laws that exist? And if you're not, then you're too stupid to exist. Like that's really all it is. That you're not useful anymore, right? Because the only reason that we exist, if there is a reason, or if there should be a reason, is to discover what this place is and what we're doing here and what anything is to have a general sense of curiosity about what's going on, right? And if we're not going to do that, and instead we're just going to blow ourselves up, well, then the universe is going to sit back and watch us do it. Right? It's just going to watch us do it. The universe is fascist. No, it's just so we cannot lay judgment. That's just the simple truth. Is that if the universe is going to chew us up and eat us, tough shit. Right? Go talk to the manager about it. Yeah, capitalism requires an underclass. People have internalized that value. Absolutely. Yeah, that title is pithy. I'm stealing that. I mean, it's true, though. Right? It's why I get really up on my haunches about this lesser of two evils stuff. Like, yeah, it creates a democracy for psychopaths. Straight up. Line go up good. I could see that as a responsive reading in church. Capitalism has given us money. Line go up good. Capitalism has given us bootstraps. Line go up good. Did you see Caitlin Johnstone's newest article about the war in Ukraine? It's actually one of her best. Can you put it in the Discord, bud? I love Caitlin Johnstone. I do have Caitlin Johnstone. I love this one that she wrote because it's just pointing out something that I've been talking about. Modern empire apologia is mostly just Westerners arguing with reality. Oh, we got some people in the Twitch stream. A guy named Genghis Khan is, of course, saying that capitalism is pretty good. Yeah, like, a guy named Genghis Khan would say that. Roving across Mongol and massacring thousands of people is good, actually. Yeah, Simon's response, nothing's wrong with capitalism. Yeah. Genghis Khan, I mean, if you're saying there's nothing wrong with capitalism, you invalidate your own opinion pretty much immediately. right? Like, literally, I just finished reading an article that says 50% of my society is living paycheck to paycheck, right? Like, I could say pretty clearly, if you're going to say nothing's wrong with capitalism, I don't really need to take you seriously as a person. Like, time to open up that brain a little bit. Time to actually start thinking about what's going on in the world around you. Time to stop taking your dad's money, and time to actually understand about what it is that capitalism is doing out there. An absolute truism, perfect timing for this article. Modern empire apologia is mostly just Westerners arguing with reality. It's funny how much of empire apologia in the 2020s consists of Westerners saying that governments who aren't aligned with the United States shouldn't have the security concerns they have, and shouldn't regard their national interests the way they do. Armchair proxy warriors against Russia defend the NATO expansionism which led to the war in Ukraine, by saying that Russia should simply not have taken issue with a Western military alliance amassing war machinery on its doorstep. If you bring up the fact that a great many Western analysts spent a great many years warning that the actions of NATO powers after the fall of the USSR was going to provoke Russia into war, their only argument is to say that Russia should not have been provoked by those actions. You see the same thing with regard to China. Beijing's standoff with Taiwan is essentially an unresolved civil war that's been frozen in its current state, largely by U.S. interventionism, since the creation of the PRC, with its historical background that stretches back centuries. The Western response to the Chinese push to reunify the island with the mainland has been to insist that Beijing simply began regarding Taiwan as a sovereign nation, despite the fact that those Western governments themselves do not recognize Taiwan's sovereignty, due to the complex nature of the standoff. In both cases, the U.S. centralized empire is confronting nations which have policies and positions in place regarding their immediate surroundings, which run much deeper and go much further back than vapid liberal idealism. Russia was invaded through Ukraine by both Napoleon and Hitler. Taiwan was used by the Japanese as an unsinkable aircraft carrier from which to continuously attack the Chinese mainland during World War II. You can disagree with the deep-rooted security concerns of these nations if you want, but what you can't do is simply hand-wave them away just because they don't fit in with the made-up rules the West likes to pretend it plays by. The reason foreign policy realists like John Mearsheimer were able to correctly predict years in advance that the West's aggressions towards Russia meant that Ukraine is going to get wrecked was because they were just looking objectively at the raw data of what the West was doing and what Russia's national security positions were. They weren't fixating on ideological shoulds or shouldn'ts, or babbling about what it should be and the moral position for Russia to have in some alternate hypothetical universe. They were focused on what was happening and what would happen. And a lot of death and destruction would have been avoided if they'd been listened to. Instead, the empire has opted to barrel forward with its aggressions against Russia and is now doing the same with China. And anyone who points out that these are terrifyingly incendiary provocations gets shouted down by what essentially amounts to arguments against reality. That's the main tool in the empire apologists' toolbox these days, arguing with reality. If you point out the reality of where people are at in Moscow and Beijing with regard to Western provocations on their nation's borders, their only answer is to say, yeah, well, that's not how things should be, so we're going to keep doing what we're doing. It's like being warned that you'll get punched if you keep yelling ethnic slurs in public, but doing it anyway because you believe people should respect free speech, and then melodramatically clutching your broken nose and yelling at what happened should not have happened. Reality doesn't care about your ideological shoulds and shouldn'ts. As far as reality is concerned, there's just what happens and what does not happen. If you actually want to avoid certain outcomes, you can't just heap a bunch of conceptual shoulds and shouldn'ts on concrete circumstances. You've got to actually conduct yourself in a way that steers clear of those outcomes. And the issue here, of course, is that Western empire doesn't really want to avoid those outcomes. It stood everything to gain by provoking the war in Ukraine, and preventing the rise of China by any means necessary is an absolutely fundamental requirement for securing U.S. planetary hegemony. The empire is doing what it wants to, regardless of the consequences, and its propaganda machine is churning out shoulds and shouldn'ts in order to justify those actions that trusting members of the public then go on to regurgitate. Arguing with reality never works, whether you're talking about international relations, interpersonal relationships, or the inner workings of your own mind. The way out of suffering is the same on any scale. Dealing with reality as it actually is, and working with life on life's term. Silverlight, good to see you. Most of my problem with capitalism lately is that it's incentivized to make and or regurgitate garbage and fool people into giving away their money for it. It's a race to the bottom. Yeah, absolutely. Quez, how long until you join an alt-right group? What are you talking about, dude? Like, I'm a communist. Like, the alt-right and the far-right are my natural enemies. It's a very strange thing that's going on in the society that's pretending as though people on the far left and the far right have anything to do with one another. It's very, very odd, if you ask me. Just me, good to see you. You got me, just me. Technically, there is nothing wrong with capitalism. It's working how it's supposed to. You know what, man? Checkmate. You got me, man. That's actually a better thing to say. Like, yeah, you're right. All the suffering and the pain and the destruction that capitalism is causing is, yeah, it's working exactly correctly. Yeah, Genghis Khan wasn't a capitalist. He'd probably have been a good one, though. Juan says auto workers should be paid what they owe. These poor folks already work themselves to death, but the capitalists could care less about that. Yeah, of course. Russia, China, and DPRK having a military to defend themselves just as bad as the U.S. bombing in other countries. Yeah. Ultras, absolutely. Look at the Z. YouTube has made it very clear, so I've got to delete this comment, okay? We'll just remove that. Yeah. Sorry, bud. Verifaka says capitalism is done. What we have is a type of sophisticated feudalism that most people are not aware of. He calls it techno-feudalism. Yeah, I read an article about that last week. I don't know that I actually care for this argument. The more I think about it, the more I kind of think, isn't that just going to empower a group of people to be like, yeah, that's right, that this isn't capitalism. What we need to do is get back to capitalism, right? Isn't that just going to empower a bunch of people being like, yeah, techno-feudalism, that's correct. So capitalism is a better system than that. So we need to get back to capitalism, right? Just completely ignoring the fact that, like, this is what capitalism does, that it just collapses back into feudal states. No, I know I read the wrong article, Eric. I just wanted to read this article. Yeah. No, you're right, Ligand to Z, but it is as it is, bud. What do we got here? Yeah, this proxy war can't be both unprovoked and a great strategic investment. Absolutely. Yeah, Genghis Khan. Hey, didn't Canada just salute a Ukrainian SS supporter? Not just a supporter, my man. Straight up a Nazi, right? Straight up a Nazi. Yeah, here we go. Like, and all our media has been doing the entire time has been Nazi apologencia. Like, that's what we're watching. We're watching Nazi apologetics, right? Like that's what it is. That's what we're doing here in Canada. We love it. Yeah, Spooky, you're absolutely right. Caitlin has consistently based takes. That's why I read her, because she knows what's up and she does it very well. Oh my God, go away. What's this? Go away. And you'll see that the strategy of the media class and of the political class is to say it's all a big oopsie, right? A former federal justice minister says the failure of indifference and inaction over Canada's history with Nazis in the country likely contributed to Parliament's unknowing recognition of a Nazi veteran in the House of Commons last week. Let me make my position as clear as it possibly can be. They knew that they were honoring a Nazi. I think it's pretty, in my opinion, it's pretty black and white. There is a 0% chance that they did not know that Yaroslav Hunka was a Nazi. There's a 0% chance that they did not know this. I think that there is enough plausible deniability outside of the Liberal Party, and even like Liberal MP backbenchers maybe can successfully do plausible deniability, but there is a 0% chance that Chrystia Freeland did not know. There's a 0% chance that Justin Trudeau did not know. There is an absolute 0% chance that the organizers of the Liberal Party did not know that this guy was a Nazi. So anybody that's going to stand in front of me and say, no, Rhoda invited him and didn't, and it was a surprise, like, you're a dummy. You're a very deeply stupid person who needs to stop sharing your opinion, who needs to silence yourself and start listening to other people. Because the truth is that there is no way that Rhoda walks into this room, right? Hey, everybody, I'd like to invite someone to be invited during a highly sensitive diplomatic meeting of foreign leaders who are ostensibly allies with one another during a war period time, and I'd like to have someone honored by the entire parliament in front of the president of Ukraine. Can I do that? And nobody goes, well, why? Who is this person? Like, why should we care about this person? Why should we waste Zelensky's time with this? What should we possibly, how could this possibly have any merit or meaning whatsoever? Oh, well, it's because he's a Ukrainian that fought against Russians in World War II. Now the argument is that, oh, they're just so dumb. Like, there is literally no shot at this. There's just no chance whatsoever that these people are this dumb. That the incompetence argument has a limit. Like, and the limit is it so stupid that it makes you question whether or not a person could tie their own shoes, right? And that would be it. If you were born after World War II, you know what Ukrainian that fought against Russians in World War II means. You cannot be this stupid. Like, you cannot be this stupid. And so there's this great Arthur Conan Doyle quote, right? The fellow that wrote Sherlock Holmes. If you eliminate the impossible, then all that remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. And so what that means is that the Trudeau Liberals, Trudeau himself certainly, we literally have Hunka's daughter posting on Facebook talking about how Trudeau met with Hunka before the fact. And then I've got documents showing the Liberal Party denying that happened. So who are you going to believe? So Trudeau himself knows. Chrystia Freeland, who has a degree in Russian studies from Harvard and then a master's in Slavonic studies from Oxford, right? There is a 0% chance that she does not know. She certainly knows. And so the question becomes, well, why? Why would they do this? Where is the value in it for them to honor a literal Nazi on the floor of Parliament? And my answer is very simple. You guys know what a dog whistle is, right? Well, here's a dog foghorn, right? And the result of it is pretty predictable. I had it right in front of me. This would make me the greatest ever. Yeah. White supremacists honor Ukrainian Nazi Hunka, who was honored in Parliament for fighting the USSR in World War II. Active Club Canada paid tribute to the Ukrainian hero, Yaroslav Hunka, defender of Europe against the Bolshevik hordes in the 40s. Right now in Canada is a hot topic after the veteran got a standing ovation in the Canadian Parliament. So what has it done? It's done exactly the thing that we said it was going to do. It's empowered Nazis and white supremacists. It's empowered the very people it was supposed to empower. It's given them the feeling that they can stand up and say this kind of stuff. Ultras, not Reds. Right? Like, we are watching the country get taken over openly by fascists. Openly. And what Trudeau did was a not at all subtle whatsoever dog whistle to empower these people, but then also to empower Ukrainian Nazis and to strengthen ties between the Canadian armed forces who funds and trains Nazis and those very Nazis. Like, this is the only narrative that actually makes any sense at all, as soon as you actually look at the facts and pay attention to the facts. Because what most people do is they just take the story at face value and go, oopsie-doo, and they just believe the media as if the media has any credibility left whatsoever. When what is obviously the truth is that Trudeau is bullshitting everybody. He knows he's leaving office. He knows that he can't win this next election. And so he's trading his chips in for money. Because line go up good. From Caitlin Johnstone again. We're doing 2 for you today, Caitlin. This proxy war can't be both unprovoked and a great strategic investment. No, wrong button. Buttons. Here we go. As opposition to funding the U.S. proxy war in Ukraine increases on Capitol Hill, Empire apologists have been frantically churning out think pieces about how much the war serves U.S. strategic interests in order to manufacture support for its continued backing by Washington. Such arguments flatly contradict the propaganda messaging we were inundated with at the beginning of the war, that this was an unprovoked invasion. But Empire managers don't seem particularly interested in defending the narrative anymore. The latest appearance in this new Our Ukraine proxy warfare greatly advances U.S. strategic interests genre of op-eds comes to us courtesy of notorious war propagandist Max Boot via the Washington Post. Boot's article was originally titled, "Ukraine Aid is a Great Investment. Don't Let the MAGA Republicans End It." But the headline has since been revised to the slightly less creepy, "This is what the U.S. is getting by aiding Ukraine." Claiming that funding the war is the right thing to do strategically, Boot argues that it is hard to think of any U.S. foreign policy initiative since the end of the Cold War that has been more successful or more important than U.S. aid to Ukraine. Russia has lost an estimated 120,000 soldiers, and 170 to 180,000 have been injured, Boot writes. Russia has also lost an estimated 2,329 tanks, 2,817 infantry fighting vehicles, 2,868 trucks and jeeps, 354 armored personnel carriers, 538 self-propelled artillery vehicles, 310 towed artillery pieces, 92 fixed-wing aircraft, and 106 helicopters. The Russian armed forces have been devastated, thereby reducing the risk to frontline NATO states such as Poland and the Baltic republics that the United States is treaty-bound to protect, Boot continued. And all of that has been accomplished without having to put a single U.S. soldier at risk on the front lines. That's an incredible investment, gloats Boot. At no time in his masturbatory gushing about how many Russians this war has helped kill does Boot make any mention of the immense toll this deliberately provoked and completely unnecessary war has taken on Ukrainian lives. Their deaths and dismemberments and displacements are the largest price being paid into this investment by far, but Boot doesn't deem this even worthy of a footnote. We've been seeing this investment line being promoted with increasing frequency by U.S. empire managers and their apologists. In an article published in the Connecticut Post last month, Senator Richard Blumenthal assured Americans that we're getting our money's worth on our Ukrainian investment. A few days prior to that, Senator Mitt Romney had described the proxy war as the best national defense spending I think we've ever done, because we're diminishing and devastating the Russian military for a very small amount of money. A weakened Russia is a good thing. In December, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell said that funding the proxy war is a direct investment in reducing Vladimir Putin's future capabilities to menace America, threaten our allies, and contest our core interests. Last November, the Imperial War Machine-funded think tank Center for European Policy Analysis published a report arguing that U.S. spending of 5.6% of its defense budget to destroy nearly half of Russia's conventional military capability seems like an absolutely incredible investment. We saw one of the most glaring examples of this new genre of empire apologia last week when Bill Kristol's led group Republicans for Ukraine put out a television ad explaining how much this war is a fantastic investment which serves U.S. strategic interests. When America arms Ukraine, we get a lot for a little, the ad said. Putin is an enemy of America. We've used 5% of our defense budget to arm Ukraine, and with it, they've destroyed 50% of Putin's army. We've done all this by sending weapons from storage, not our troops. The more Ukraine weakens Russia, the more it also weakens Russia's closest ally, China. We are asked to believe a lot of very stupid things by the propagandists of the U.S. centralized empire, but one of the very stupidest is the claim that this war simultaneously A, was completely unprovoked, and B, just coincidentally happens to massively advance U.S. strategic interests. It really cannot be both. If you accept that this war is a very low-cost, high-reward means for the U.S. to advance its strategic interests overseas, then you'd have to have tapioca for brains to also believe that the U.S. wouldn't have gone out of its way to make sure the war happens. And indeed, that's exactly what occurred, which is why U.S. intelligence operatives and Western foreign policy analysts spent years saying that the actions of the U.S. and its allies were going to provoke Russia into war. The reason it matters so much that the war in Ukraine was provoked by the U.S. centralized empire is because that shows you where the path to peace lies. When empire simps object to criticism of Western proxy warfare in Ukraine with, "Oh, so you're saying we should just abandon the Ukrainians and let Putin take over the country?" What they are missing is that this is not a war between only Russia and Ukraine, and Russia doesn't see it as such. Russia believes it is fighting a war against the aggression and expansionism of the NATO alliance, which the head of NATO himself recently confirmed. What this means is that the NATO alliance can facilitate peace in Ukraine by agreeing to roll back the aggressions which led to this war in the first place. NATO powers have always been fully aware that they could bring about peace in Ukraine in this way, but they choose not to move NATO war machinery away from Russia's borders and grant Moscow the same freedom from military threats in its immediate surroundings that Washington insists on in its own immediate surroundings. The managers of empire chose not to do this, and indeed actually sabotaged peace negotiations in the early day of the conflict, because they firmly believe that this war advances their interests. This is what empire apologists are omitting from the story when they claim that Putin can end this war by withdrawing troops from Ukraine. They are leaving out their own government's role in starting and perpetuating this war. To demand that Russia cease its aggressions without the Western Empire ceasing the aggressions which provoked the war in the first place is to demand that Russia lie down and submit itself to the dictates of the empire. People who call for an end to Russian aggression, but not the Western aggression Russia is reacting to, don't really want peace. They just want the empire to conquer and subjugate the insolent curs who dared to defy it. It's good to be clear on this, because it shows who the obstacles to peace really are. The longer we pretend the only people keeping this war going reside in Moscow, the longer any path towards peace will elude us. The Great and Powerful, Caitlin Johnston. Don't usually read 2 in a day, but hey. We've hit the hour mark. good opportunity to say like, share, subscribe, hit the bells, hit the whistles. Perhaps think about giving a little money to the cause, right? Your donations do help. They do add up. Make sure you're telling people about me. Make sure you're sending this stuff around. Let people know I exist. Thank you so much for being here, guys. I appreciate each and every one of you. Yeah, Russia might have lost people and equipment, but they've also activated and expanded military production. The war results in a weaker Russia in the short term, but much stronger in the future. Well, and also, you don't want to build, do you really want to build Russia's, war culture? Do you really want them to get a war culture going on? Is that really what you're looking for? Yeah, Westerners want to believe Ukrainians are literal Spartans, taking out thousands of Russians for every one Ukrainian. Yeah, it's a joke. No, we're living in this total joke period. Failure of indifference and inaction. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. Just like in 1984, the enemy was always our enemy and forever will be our enemy. All these other thoughts are wrong think. Yeah. Is this true, Tinker? Freeland is so strict with her Ukrainian nationalism that she doesn't allow her kids to speak English in her house. Just Ukrainians and outside English. Can I get a source for that? Because that's crazy. That'd be a crazy, not crazy, but just that's a bit wild. Yeah, I don't think those stats are accurate. Yeah. Oh, American imperialist lying. No shit. No shit. Russia produces more artillery than they're using. The U.S. has to resort to giving cluster bombs instead of trench bursting shells. Yeah. And then Hillary gets to go around talking about human rights, right? That's my favorite. The Americans provoke this war. They give literal cluster bombs and depleted uranium shells and things like this. And then they're like, but the human rights. We have the right to talk about human rights, absolutely. It's just there presages a right-wing reaction in Russia. They'll get frustrated and aggressive. That's not NATO success, no matter your political leanings. Yeah, but you got to remember, right? Nobody in NATO actually cares that much about NATO, right? They're all in it for line go up. That's it. Their own personal wealth and prestige, and that's it. There's no such thing as loyalty. There's no such thing as NATO isn't this faceless, monolithic power structure. It's a cobbling together alliance of a bunch of crazed lunatics who literally used to be fighting one another, and when NATO falls apart, they'll start fighting with one another again. So the only way they're able to keep the whole thing moving forward is because they're all so fucking psychotic and raving lunatics that they can all agree that destroying people is good for their bottom line, right? They can all agree that going into other nations and blowing up those other nations and stealing their resources is good for them. That's all it is. Yeah, line go up nose, exactly. I saw a methodology to see how much Russian KIA during this war. It's only 34K. Meanwhile, Ukraine is above 200K. I mean, it's wild to me that the defenders of the Ukrainian war actually think this thing is going well for them. It's just absolutely wild to me. Never once during the entire war, during this entire conflict, have the Ukrainians been responsible for moving the war line at all. That when the war line moves, it's Russia doing the moving. And there have been minor occasions when the Russians have decided to pull out of territories. And I love that the narrative about the early war days has changed from the Russians attempted a strategy that didn't work and so recalibrated to the Ukrainians pushed them out. No, the Ukrainians didn't push them out, right? But again, we're just talking to people who are not really interested in what reality is anymore. And that observation it is becoming pretty much across the entire board a total truism. That we are not interested in engaging with reality. any longer. That reality has completely disconnected, that we have completely disconnected from reality. Because if we were to acknowledge reality, right? If we were to acknowledge reality, then any sane, rational person who believes that they're capable of logic would say, "Oh, we gotta stop doing what we're doing. Like, we gotta stop doing what we're doing." Tinker writes, thousands of Ukrainians surrendered last week, I think mainly in the south, report Russian media. I don't really, on the small, kind of micro level, I don't really pay that much attention because everybody's incentivized to lie. Everyone's incentivized to lie. I would absolutely love to see the sheer meltdown liberals would have if Ukraine surrenders. No, I mean, I think what's more likely is that there will be a generalized strategic withdrawal from NATO, right? That NATO will eventually stop funding the thing. And then the line will become, because this is how the empire defends itself, right? That whoever's responsible or whoever gets scapegoated for pulling out the support from Ukraine, well, that person, we would have won that thing if not for so-and-so, right? We would have won that thing except for this guy, right? And so that's how the empire defends itself. Instead of it being, the inevitable consequence of going into a region that you have no business going into in the first place and losing the war there is that you eventually withdraw, right? That's what happened in Vietnam, that's what happened in Afghanistan. So instead of any of that, right? And instead of saying hey, the empire is at fault here, it'll be the Democrats or the Republicans or whatever scapegoat they find. Yeah, Eric, actually, Putin revealed the reason he left Kiev was because he wanted to do good faith diplomacy, but Prime Minister Johnson went to Ukraine and told Zelensky to fight until the last Ukrainian. Yeah, I think there's something to that. You take a look at the early days of the war, and it's pretty obvious that Putin wanted to just spook them into a conversation, to just be because it's a terrible war strategy what he did. It's from any perspective, to spread your entire military force over the border of Ukraine and enter from all sides all at once simultaneously is a pretty cool show of force. It's got a shock and awe kind of strategy to it, but in terms of winning a military conflict is very dumb. Right? What you straightforwardly would like to do if you're an American-minded kind of person and you don't care about casualties or life or anything like that, and is that you take all your troops and you put them into an arrowhead and you jam it into Kiev, right? You just blow the shit out of Kiev, right? And you don't start actually by jamming in your troops. You just bomb the shit out of it from the sky. Just indiscriminately, just carpet bomb the fuck out of it. If the goal was just to win, if the goal was just to be Ukraine ours, we win, Ukraine over, right? If that was the goal, indiscriminate bombing of Kiev, rolling your entire military force into Kiev and occupying it would have got that job done. And it would have happened very quickly. You would have murdered a lot of people, a lot of civilians, right? The international community would have rightly condemned it, but they condemned it anyway. So Putin's strategy of trying to spook diplomacy didn't work. And once it was obvious that it didn't work, they reformed the line and went into the region that they were there to get, which is the Donbass, and they formed a battle line. And that's where we've been at ever since. It will come to an end in 2024 election year. I mean, we'll see. It's completely possible that Biden wins. It is. Although, I think the energy is behind Trump. This war should be over already, but Ukraine refuses to surrender. I don't think they could even end it because America has much to gain from this conflict. Well, I think there's a big argument to be made, Juan, that Russia isn't exactly pushing in. You know what I mean? Russia has basically drawn the battle line. It's taken the territory. I don't think that they're interested in taking the rest of Ukraine. I don't think they're interested in pushing in on Ukraine. I think that they've got the territory they want and they're staying in that territory. And so this gives Ukraine like no real incentive to throw up the white flag, right? Like this whole conflict exists in a kind of stasis at this point, you know? And the only way that it could really come to an end is if the people in the imperial core demand that it end and stop funding it, right? This is how the Vietnam War ended, right? You just stop funding it, just pull your guys out, it's over. Or if Russia pushes into Kiev and just takes Ukraine, which I don't think they're incentivized to do that. So right now we're just in this sort of weird stasis moment. Tinker says Dems don't want a huge war in Europe during presidential election cycle due to Russia going full throttle and destroying Ukraine. I mean, who knows what these guys want anymore? Line goes up. Literally, I think that is as far as they are thinking. Like, I don't think that these guys are actually sitting here being like I don't think there's 4D chess going on. I don't think they're sitting there I don't even think they're looking at a board. Like, I really do think that these guys are just like, oh, if we sell bombs to Ukraine, then we make money. And I really, really do think that that's the bottom line on it. I think the Americans are forcing them not to surrender for some strategic market reason in relation to de-dollarization. If they surrender, I imagine that would accelerate the inevitable. Yeah, I think you're onto something here, Mikhail, that it's just like, it's about slowing down the process. Like that China is advancing on the world stage very dramatically. America doesn't produce anything or make anything. Like it's going to be very easy for the rest of the world to leave America behind. That America's only real power in the world outside of its military presence is its financialization. And if you can get away from its financialization, then all you've really got to be worried about is it rolling up on your shores and bombing the shit out of you. And so, and it looks like the de-dollarization, as it's being called, is going to happen. I don't think you could stop it at this point. Grinning says, I just can't believe I went through 20 years of Afghanistan's occupation without being overwrought about what we were doing. I'm totally disgusted by this war. I'm amazed at who I was. F me. I mean, I don't know, dude. Like, there's a lot going on. And the Afghanistan war isn't exactly, like, present in your life. Like, one of the big reasons if I wanted to be nice to Westerners in regards to why this war seems to really matter, it's because this is an existential threat, right? The Afghanistan war was not an existential threat to anybody but the Afghanistans, right? To the Afghanis. It wasn't an existential threat to all of humanity. This is. This could escalate, and it could go off the rails very quickly. Tinker writes, rule of thumb, invading force should have at least 3 to 1 in numbers. Yeah. Compton says, you know what sucks? Next election, Trump will win if Trump isn't properly prosecuted on crimes that eliminate him from running. And when Trump wins, it will be a revenge tour. Yeah. When you zoom out and look at the issue of the next elections, it's over. The whole process is just fucked now. Yeah. Like, but you guys know my position. Like, I don't think Trump was worse. Like, he was worse on certain issues, sure. But, like, overall, I don't think he was a worse president than Biden was, or even Obama. Like, I'm sure that someone's going to point out, like, the one thing that's their pet project that's going to make the whole thing. But, like, the Democrats work with the Republicans on a lot of this stuff. So it's like, I just don't have okay, Trump gets in. Okay. Then, like, a lot of the stuff that the Democrats have been like, when it comes to this whole Democrat versus Republican argument, like, you're just trying to convince me that the guy that does the slam dunk is worse than the guy who sets up the layup. Like, they work together. They're a team. They're allies, right? Like, you're trying to convince me that Mo is worse than Curly. You're trying to convince me that I need famous team duos. Like, you're basically just looking at a team like Penn and Teller, and you're trying to convince me that Penn is worse than Teller. Like, you're trying to convince me that the team that obviously works in tandem together to achieve goals together as a team, one is better to have in the driver's seat than the other. Batman and Robin. Yeah, you're trying to convince me that Robin is better than Batman. You're trying to convince me that Joker is worse than Harley Quinn. You're trying to convince me but they're not neglectful on accident. Like this, I think, is the thing that needs to be understood. They're not being neglectful on accident. That they do it on purpose. Like, they work together as a team, and the Democrats are just better at playing dumb, and they're better at presenting this sort of clean aura and presenting themselves as being competent. They're better at exuding competence, right? So they're better actors, but it doesn't mean anything. When they get into power, they don't do anything to prevent any of this stuff from happening. It's not like they're launching a war. Like, whenever I hear the whole culture war idea, I'm just like, the Democrats aren't fighting a war. Like, they're not fighting a culture war. Like, where's the Democratic side of this culture war? Crow Guy, I know the war is concerning, but what about our country? I don't understand your question, my man. Grinning, Trump's prosecutions are heating up. His businesses are going to get kicked out of New York, and that's a big part of his mystique. Is he better than Biden? Yeah, they'll lead to the same destination. I actually think that Trump is doing the right thing for his election chances. Right? He's playing the martyr. His whole shtick was, we're going in there to drain the swamp. We're gonna go in there and we're gonna go after the deep state, and and like the whole QAnon crowd and like all of this kind of stuff. And so now the deep state's going after him, right? So he gets to play this role of like, oh, the deep state's going after me, just like I said they would, and we're gonna fight back. And when I get into power, we're gonna really go after these guys, right? Like it seems to me like it's a strategy that might work. Like, it's a strategy that might work. I've been showing this one a couple of times. I definitely want to read this one out loud. This is from Nikki Reed. The lesser of two evils is a democracy for psychopaths. Donald Trump has to be stopped. The man is a menace to democracy with an insatiable appetite for debauchery, a geriatric career gangster with a rap sheet longer than his Freudian phallic tie. The bastard has left a gruesome trail of mutilated corpses and shallow graves from Atlantic City to Jerusalem, and has grievously molested nearly as many institutions as has teenage sex workers with his greasy little orange pussy grabbers. His crimes have all been absurdly well publicized and flamboyantly brazen, yet somehow all the available polls seem to indicate that this hammer house monster of a political supervillain could very well take the White House back with a vengeance again in 2024. The mind boggles at such madness. How? How could any sane human being possibly justify voting for such an unapologetically revolting sewer mutant? The answer is actually pretty simple. Because Joe Biden has to be stopped. After all, isn't he also a geriatric career gangster with an insatiable appetite for debauchery? Pretty much every mortal sin that Donald Trump has ever committed, Joe Biden has committed at least twice. The man is a barely veiled racist sexual predator and serial plagiarist who has built a seemingly endless career pushing black children in front of armored police trucks before posing for selfies with Bono and telling a crowded Baptist church that he was the first white member of the Jackson 5. And now, that crusty old bitch has added full-blown dementia to his routine. This is why the Democrats store him in a warehouse freezer in Delaware for most of the year, and only cart him out when the wreckage of his administration needs to be publicly surveyed in order to prevent an all-out riot. The reasonably dire need to stop a creature like Donald Trump is the only reason why a creature like Joe Biden is even in the White House, and the equally reasonable dire need to stop Joe Biden is simultaneously making Donald Trump's seemingly unthinkable return to the scene of the crime a very real possibility. This, ladies and gentlemen, is American democracy in 2024, and everybody is doing it. While polls show the two grabbiest perverts in the convalescent home neck and neck with their crawl to the White House, they also show a country horrified by these options, with CNN finding more people who despise both of these candidates than anybody who actually likes either one of them. This is the rotten fruit of the lesser of two evils, that despicably American fetish shoved down every bored teenager's throat by jingoistic civics teachers since Jefferson was in nipple clamps. These are the only two monsters to choose from, and you have to vote for whichever one nauseates you the least. Otherwise, you forfeit the right to bitch about getting raped by one of them at your local drinking hole for the next 4 years. Fuck you, Mr. Fitzgerald. Stop living in my skull. This is the twisted reasoning that has led us to a contest between the two most hated and depraved plutocrats since the last two war criminals who ran for deuce, and Americans are being able to resemble what they vote for. In every living room, bar, and hair salon across the country, you will find perfectly decent working-class human beings mounting passionate defenses for increasingly heinous crimes in the name of American democracy. You will find loving stay-at-home moms defending Donald Trump's attempts to shed the votes of other loving stay-at-home moms because Joe Biden had his flunkies in the media kick sand over the last escapades of his crackhead son. You will hear hippie peaceniks justify Biden sending cluster munitions to Ukraine because Trump sold worse to the Saudis. This is sick, and it just keeps getting worse. The lesser of two evils is nothing more than a mask of sanity to place on the face of an insatiable imperial beast, the kind of moral parlor trick that serves as the cornerstone for any psychopath that is precisely the path that Americans have chosen. We are a country of decent people living comfortably in a spacious ranch house in the suburbs of the first world, but there are bodies rotting in the basement, and they have been there for a very long time. The imperial killer who built this house for us has done a masterful job of keeping its occupants detached from the crimes committed in our name across the globe, but the chickens always come home to roost, and the killers we sanction with our votes are increasingly bringing their work home with them, behaving like the dictators they sponsor in the third world, while we all smile politely and wash the blood from our dishes before shouting "everything's fine" over the screams and power tools. We are living in a horror movie. We aren't the victims in this story yet, but we will be shortly if we don't find a way to flip the script and retake our dignity. Had they stuck to politics, Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy would have had a running shot at winning this game by 2028. After all, Ted was a handsome and charismatic Rockefeller Republican who worked as an assistant to the chairman of the Washington State Republican Party, and Gacy was a successful Chicago businessman whose work for the local Democratic Party earned him an audience with the then First Lady Rosalind Carter. So, which is the lesser evil? I'm fucking serious here. This is the system, isn't it? If it's Bundy versus Gacy 2028, then which is the responsible choice for American democracy? Bundy is great on taxes, but pretty vile on women's lib. But hey, at least he's straight, and most of his victims are over the age of consent, and somebody has to stop that killer clown. Do you feel sick yet? Are you ashamed of yourself? Good. That's a start. It's a sign that you still have a functioning conscience. But mark my words, you won't for long if we continue to use democracy as an excuse to avoid the uncomfortable fact that America is a fundamentally evil institution, one built on genocide and slavery, one that exports mass murder and fascism to every corner of the globe, and both parties are in on it. The candidates are irrelevant. They all serve the same masters, but they are getting worse because America is getting worse. And America is getting worse for the simple reason that evil is not sustainable. Human beings are not designed to live in an amoral cesspool indefinitely. We all crack eventually beneath the weight of our sins. So what do? Who do we vote for? Here's a radical idea. How about no one? This is a rigged system and we all know it, so let's stop justifying its increasingly demented existence by refusing to participate in it. Even if some knight in white shining armor from a third party managed to jump the barricade, what difference would it make? You could put Eugene goddamn Debs in charge of a slaughterhouse, and it would still be a fucking slaughterhouse. So let's boycott the slaughterhouse and demand something better as loudly as humanly possible. Let's protest the debates. Let's hold sit-ins outside the polling stations and demand direct referendums on the war in Ukraine and the runaway police state, instead of ferrying these responsibilities out to known psychopaths. Or just stop engaging the American government at all. Use your campaign donations to buy a patch of dirt in the sticks and start your own goddamn government. Turn the nearest abandoned box store into a squat and turn that squat into a commune. Do what the real hippies and the Amish did. Drop out of a sickening system and start living like human beings again. But whatever you do, stop making excuses for people that we all know are evil just because the other guy sickens you more. That kind of relationship is abusive, and believe it or not, you deserve better than to be governed by a democracy of psychopaths. We all do. Like, this is where we're at. This is where we at. Like, this is where we are as a people. Like, and the faster we recognize it, the faster we get there, the faster we see that the system itself is completely demented, that it cannot be reformed, that it cannot be changed, that it has to either be confronted or abandoned, that you can't work within it. Like, it's over for America. Like, it is over. It's not going to suddenly not be over. That if we're going to engage in the conversation of Trump v. Biden, it's just entertainment. It's just entertainment, as far as I'm concerned. We're just sitting here just in enjoying the entertainment of it. Because that's all it is. It's just two clowns having a fight. Like, when I watch the Three Stooges, right, I can sit back and enjoy it. But if somebody actually started to take seriously the idea that things will get different if Larry gets in, I'd be like, oh, okay, bud. Like, I didn't realize that you were also a clown. Like, Trump will make a deal in the end and not run. Nah, Trump can't stop himself. He has to run. Like, he has to run. He just has to. Like, what possible deal would Trump accept? The deep state is using everything in their power to get rid of Trump by any means necessary without going the messy route, but Trump has already changed America forever. I think that's true, actually. Like, Trump was the one that kind of took the mask off and showed everybody, like, oh, like, this place is crazy. Like, this whole thing is insane. That anybody can come in here and run this place. Yeah, at least his victims were over the age of consent. I'm laughing and retching at the same time. What a mess. Yeah. The capitalists will punish us when we abandon them wholesale. That's what Cop City is for. Yeah. Epic anarcho-genderqueer gonzo blogger from central Pennsylvania. That's the author's tagline. That's hilarious. I definitely missed that. Hold on. What is agoraphobic? What is that? I don't even know what that is. A type of anxiety disorder. Afraid to leave environments they know or consider to be safe. Yeah, fair enough. I love that we have created a phobia for saying if you're safe and you don't want to leave the safety of that place to go to somewhere dangerous, that's a phobia. Or you're like that seems completely normal. That seems completely normal. Running is good money. Yeah. I don't even think it's about the money, Twin Tower. Good to see you, by the way, bud. Twin Tower here on Twitch, running is good money. I think it's just about the fame. I think that if you ask me what I think it is all about for Donald Trump, I think it is all about he wants people to look at him. He wants fame. I don't think he wants money. I think he wants people to know who he is. I think he wants people to see him. And what better way to try to get fame or to be famous than to become embedded in the historical fabric of your country, the most powerful nation in the history of the world, right? To be the president of the United States. Like, people still talk about Jefferson. People still talk about Washington. People still talk about Lincoln, right? United States presidents get talked about for centuries. And Donald Trump will be talked about for centuries, right? And I think that that is what it is for him, that he wants the fame more than anything. I don't think it's about the money. Like, I don't see how it could possibly be about the money. Like, I feel like it's a money sink being in this kind of politics. Good opportunity to say like, share, subscribe, guys. Hit the bells, hit the whistles. The irony is the word agora means market, so it's fear of going outside because the market has swallowed everything. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, are we shocked? Like, are we shocked that, the same people who are celebrating Nazis, right, in Parliament are also supporting a MAID policy that's facilitating death by poverty? A Vancouver woman says she will die imminently from an otherwise manageable illness. A 56-year-old Vancouver woman says she will die this month because British Columbia's provincial government is refusing to cover essential health costs for her disabling illness. Madeline uses a pseudonym while advocating for herself because she and her health providers are concerned that the pressure of going public can compromise her health and even kill her. The main barriers preventing her from managing her symptoms and living with dignity is the lack of government support. She wants to live, but without coverage, her condition is deteriorating. Left with no other options, she's been approved for medical assistance in dying. MAID. She is one of 580,000 Canadians with a debilitating disease called myalgic encephalomyelitis. I think I did okay there. According to researchers, the quality of life for people living with ME/CFS is substantially lower than those living with other diseases and conditions like lung cancer, depression, schizophrenia, multiple sclerosis, and rheumatoid arthritis. Like more than 1.5 million disabled Canadians, she also lives in poverty. This number is likely to continue rising as more than 1.4 million Canadians infected with COVID-19 continue experiencing debilitating symptoms that are, in many cases, similar to ME/CFS. The cost of severe forms of ME/CFS and long COVID is substantial. The doctors who treat her condition have told her she must conserve her energy to live. That means receiving pre-made meals, housekeeping, and laundry services. The medicines, treatments, and other suggestions provided by medical professionals could cost upwards of $7,000 per month, she says. However, few of these services are subsidized, leaving Madeline reliant on the charity of medical care providers who perform discounted services. When I first started to deteriorate some 20 years ago, I made 5 attempts to get housekeeping, and I was refused by the ministry every single time, said Madeline, adding that her condition was considered an episodic illness. To this day, I still can't get housekeeping because there's no category of coverage. Many people with ME and long COVID experience a symptom called post-exertional malaise, PEM, due to these diseases breaking the body's energy systems. They have less energy to start with, use it up quicker, and recover slower. Repeatedly draining the battery can lead to less battery recharging, and over time, less function and worsening symptoms, says Jessica DeMars, a physiotherapist treating people with long COVID-19 at Breathe Well Physio. Conserving energy and pacing is considered at the moment the best management strategy. And while Madeline has been able to scrape by using money from a crowdfunding campaign for a few years, she has now run out of money. She is one of a number of chronically ill people who have gone public in recent years to raise concerns about Canada's expansion of MAID, questioning why the government has made it easier to access assisted death than the support people with disabilities need to live. Dr. Nahid Dosani, a palliative care physician, told Ricochet that people are choosing MAID out of desperation. We have seen in our public discourse many cases across Canada where people are thinking about and even pursuing MAID because they want to die, because they're not adequately being supported with the resources to live. This is concerning to me, and it should be concerning to every single Canadian, he says. In 2021, as the federal government moved to make MAID more accessible for patients, Dosani testified to the Canadian Senate to share his experience providing street-based care for people with serious illnesses who also experience structural vulnerabilities like homelessness, poverty, and systemic racism. He told senators that MAID can be arranged as quickly as 2 weeks, but it takes years to get people into housing, months to get income supports, and weeks to get mental health and harm reduction treatment, all of which are essential to a good quality of life. I found the whole thing morally distressing, he says, describing why he asked to testify before the Senate. If we are going to make it easier for people to get MAID, then we have a moral obligation to make sure they don't pursue MAID because society doesn't adequately support their needs. Out of funds, out of options. Recently, Madeline's condition has deteriorated, which she says is a result of a lack of tangible support from the province, worsening systems she's dealt with for over 2 decades, such as recurrent infections, extreme pain, exhaustion, and cognitive impairment. It's really hard for me to be brutally honest about the measure of pain, exhaustion, and suffering, she says. Madeline was approved based on the low quality of life of the condition, directly caused by the lack of financial support. Her condition is manageable, but costly. Without additional coverage, she will deteriorate to death. MAID for me is not a life and death choice, she says. It's about what kind of death I want when I run out of money. Without additional support, she says she will die imminently. She doesn't have to schedule a time to die in advance, but when she feels her condition deteriorates enough, she can call up her assessors to set up an appointment. I shouldn't be at the mercy of a charitable support, she says. Madeline lives alone in her Vancouver, BC apartment, subsiding on the $1,483.50 in disability payments from the province. Until August, only $375 of this allowance can go to pay rent, based on a shelter allowance policy established in 2007, when the average rent for a 2-bedroom apartment was about $900. Now legislation has increased this allowance to $500, even though the average cost of rent has roughly tripled. She turned to crowdfunding, but it hasn't been enough to manage her condition. There's $5,040 worth of expenses for physiotherapists and other medical specialists like massage therapy. However, the province only covers $23 per visit for 10 visits yearly. She spends around $350 monthly on pharmacy items to manage symptoms. Through the clinic recommends a regimen of $470 per month. Another $560 a month on supplements, though she would need to spend closer to $800 to get all the supplements she needs. Then there's another $700 for a pre-made specialized meal for her celiac disease. The ministry only provides $45 monthly for general vitamins and minerals, and $180 for other dietary means. Proper housekeeping costs close to $400 to $800 per month, though she cannot afford it. There is no allowance for these services, and up to $400 monthly for medical transport to her appointments. The ministry only covers 0.36 per kilometer. Honestly, I can't continue reading this article. This is brutal. This is brutal. Like, we've got a Nazi. We've got a Nazi being honored in our parliament with this nonsense going on. Oh, we got somebody in my chat in Twitch here talking about, what are we talking about? Glazy, do me a favor. Yeah, I know that you think you know things, but you don't. Can you find the academic for me? Can you find a good book on that subject, the Holodomor? Who's the Oxford or Harvard or MIT academic who I should be reading? Can you find a good source for me, my man? Unless this is just a made-up bullshit thing that you're spreading around because you're a loser. Right? Can you actually find a name and a book that I could read? Something like this. No, hold on. History denier, right? A Stalin apologist. Okay, great. Blah, blah, blah. Right? All of your dumb, illiterate nonsense, right? Because you don't actually know anything about the subject. You should be able to shut me down very quickly, right? This should be an easy thing for you to do. It should be extremely easy. The CIA. Great. Okay, so next, right? Again, there should be a Harvard, Oxford, MIT, right? University of Virginia, right? University of Massachusetts, University of any place that exists anywhere, University of India, right? A Chinese university, a Russian university, right? Like, you should be able to provide a name. And if you're actually sourcing the CIA, no, that looks like the CIA to me, my man. Right? CIA. So we here at the Canadian Commie do not listen to what the CIA has to say. Right? We don't listen to known liars who lie. Oh, CLA. Oh, okay. My bad. Let's take this on. The University of Minnesota, driven to discover Holocaust genocide studies. It was the first genocide that was methodically planned out and penetrated by depriving the very people who were producers of their food. Embarrassing already. I mean, we know that the British like to use famines as well. Okay. Causes of the Holodomor. I bet you anything that if I just look this up. Here, let's see if I can... how do I get this from here to there? That's not going to work. Like, these guys have gotten really good at telling a nice story, but they don't actually provide any sources, you'll find. And, like, it's a nice story, but, like, I'm looking for things like a picture, you know? I'm looking for things like, I'm looking for things like when the Bengali famine was going on, right? When the British were committing the Bengali famine, we literally have Winston Churchill telling them that they should die like rats, right? You should sort of expect to see a similar thing. Like, because what I usually see, and really all I'm seeing here is like a story, right? I could tell a story. Anybody can tell a story, but like pictures, right? Primary sources, right? Literally a speech given by Stalin, right? Like, and so it looks to me like the University of, what do we got here? The University of Minnesota, driven to discover, College of Liberal Arts, Holocaust and Genocide Study. Like, how much do we want to bet? Let's take a look. Let's do it in real time. University of Minnesota, College of Liberal Arts. I love that we're doing like the Holodomor. I love that we're doing like University of Minnesota, right? Like as if there wouldn't be like a really, really major institution, right? Okay. I'd like to take a break. I've got maybe about 15 minutes here before we before we get into the we're going to be getting into the mandate for leadership, the 2025 mandate for leadership, probably in about 15 minutes, to continue our read through of this 920-page document. Right? This is the Heritage Foundation, as well as many conservative groups coming together to make a document that can only be described as absolutely insane. Like, absolutely insane. So, yeah, always with this stuff. Look, it's that, if we bring it up, right? There's always like source required with this stuff. And again, it would be, you found a Harvard source? Fantastic. What's the Harvard source? Like, you could provide a name. I would read this book. Like, I've been asking for sources for 3 years now, and nobody ever has any. Right? And then the sources that are given are often just a repeating of the propaganda piece, right? Which kind of looks like this. Like, I'm almost tempted to just read through this just so everybody can see pretty clearly. Like, so let's just do it, actually. From the University of Minnesota, Holodomor. The Ukrainian genocide. In the case of the Holodomor, this was the first genocide that was methodologically planned out and perpetrated by depriving the very people who were producers of food of their nourishment for survival. Like, line one, a joke. Like, no, it wasn't. Like, if it occurred, the idea of intentional famines, that this is being the first one, kind of an embarrassing thing to say from the beginning. What is especially horrific is that the withholding of food was used as a weapon of genocide, and that it was done in a region of the world known as the breadbasket of Europe. Professor Andrea Graziosi, University of Naples. Yeah, fantastic. We've done it. We've proved it. Again, like a picture of it, right? That imagine, like, we have the technology to send like 20 million tanks at the Russians, but not to take a picture. Okay. An introduction. In 1932 and 1933, millions of Ukrainians were killed in the Holodomor, a man-made famine engineered by the Soviet government of Joseph Stalin. Not a single Russian bureaucrat saying so. We don't have anybody talking about organizing this thing. There's just nobody actually talking about doing that, which I find to be astounding. Like, it's actually astounding that this claim is made when we've opened the Soviet archives, we've gone into the Soviet archives, we have the entire works of Joseph Stalin, we've got the works of Lenin, we've got all of the minutes from all of the meetings that happened during the Soviets, right? They didn't talk about this. Like, imagine trying to organize something like this without actually organizing it. What, do they read each other's minds? Do they have superpowers, right? So if you're going to make this claim, you need to provide evidence for it. So let's see what evidence they provide. So far, zero. This is a story. The primary victims of the Holodomor, literally death inflicted by starvation, were rural farmers and villagers, who made up roughly 80% of Ukrainians' population in the 1930s. It's also worth pointing out that something like 7 million Ukrainians were the second largest group to support the Soviets in World War II. So this idea that there was this intentional famine caused by the Soviets in order to antagonize the Ukrainians is sort of thwarted by the idea that the second largest group that supported the Soviets during the war were Ukrainians. Like, so what's that about? How do you square that circle? So let's continue to see the no evidence here. Okay. While it's impossible to determine the precise number of victims of the Ukrainian genocide, most estimates by scholars range from roughly 3.5 million to 7 million. So 3.5 million or double that. Great. So you might as well just say 5,500 billion, right? The most detailed demographic studies estimate the death toll at 3.9 million. Yeah, because if you fuss with numbers, you can make them say whatever you like. Historians agree, do they, that as with other genocides, the precise number will never be known. Yep, it's usually the case that things that have no evidence are not really known. Through a study of the Holodomor, which has been referred to as the Great Famine, I think the Great Famine's a better name because it was a famine. Like, that's the one thing that we can't deny, right? There definitely was a famine. I mean, the Soviets were running around trying to alleviate the famine, right? We have all the evidence in the world to show that they were moving grain around trying to solve this famine problem. By any estimate, that's exactly what they did. Students can come to understand that Holodomor is an example of how prejudice and a desire to dominate and control a particular ethnic group can lead to the misuse of power, mass oppression, and genocide, which is why the Ukrainians widely supported the Soviets. Makes sense, right? Ukraine before the Holodomor. Beginning in the 18th century, Ukrainian territories were divided between the Austrian and Russian empires. In the aftermath of World War I and the overthrow of the Russian monarchy, in February 1917, Ukraine set up a provisional government, declaring itself independent Ukrainian People's Republic in January 1918. The Ukrainian People's Republic fought the Bolshevik Red Army for 3 years, but lost its fight for independence. So now we're just in straight up like monarchist territory, right? Like, I love it. The bulk of Ukrainian territory was forcibly incorporated into the Soviet Union, or USSR, and by 1922, Ukraine became the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. Then the USSR sanctioned the requisition of all surplus agricultural projects from the rural population, resulting in economic collapse. Like, what? Man, these guys, this is storytelling. Like, the Soviets took all their food, and so the economy collapsed, which is why most Ukrainians supported the Soviet Union. Discontent among the farmers forced Lenin to halt the requisitions to bring in the new economic policies. The NEP was intended to provide greater economic freedoms and permit private enterprise. Of course. That's what it's all about, eh? Capitalism needs to come in here, and we need to capitalize these capitalists to capitalize the capitalism. We are a very serious institution that has seriously studied this, and we're certainly not storytellers telling a story. Beginning in 1923, the Soviet authorities also pursued a policy of indigenization, which in the Ukrainian SSR took the form of Ukrainization, a policy of national and cultural liberalization that promoted Ukrainian language use. Sorry. The goal for the introduction of both NEP and Ukraine was to increase support for Soviet regime in Ukraine. So we're committing a genocide by promoting Ukrainian language use in education, mass media, and government. So I'm going to say that again so that you kind of realize how dumb this whole thing is and how fast the people who are speaking the firmest about it show you how stupid it is, right? That the Soviets are attempting to commit a genocide against the Ukrainian people to ethnically cleanse them, even though the Ukrainians end up being the second largest ethnic group that supports them in World War II. And they're committing this genocide of a famine to murder Ukrainians by promoting Ukrainian language use in education, mass media, and the government. Right there. Like, this shit is stupid. And if you're going to come at me with this dumb shit, right, make sure it's not full of stupid shit that makes you look stupid. Causes of the Holodomor. Here we go. I'm sure this will be loaded with good sources, right? Primary sources. We're definitely going to see a lot of Russians talking about this. We'll definitely see like Stalin and Lenin having big, long discussions about their intentional plan, like the way that Churchill had big, long discussions to enact the Bengali famine, right? I'm sure this is going to be a really serious thing that's generally serious, right? By the end of the 1920s, Soviet leader Joseph Stalin consolidated his control of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union by being elected. Just like Joe Biden consolidated his control of the American government, right? Feeling threatened by Ukraine's strengthening cultural autonomy, okay, Stalin took measures to destroy the Ukrainian peasantry and the Ukrainian intellectual and cultural elites to prevent them from seeking independence from Ukraine. Source required. How? When? At what time? Like, what did he do? Oh, did he go after a bunch of fucking landlords in order to redistribute land into the peasantry that they were committing into wage slavery? The kulaks? Is that what we're talking about? Embarrassing. To prevent Ukrainian national counter-revolution, right? I mean, again, Ukrainians, the number 2 ethnic group that supported them in World War II. So, Stalin initiated mass-scale political repressions through widespread intimidation, arrests, and imprisonment. Source required. Thousands of Ukrainian intellectuals, church leaders, and Ukrainian Communist Party functionaries who had supported pro-Ukrainian policies were executed by the Soviet regime. What was their names? When? At what time? Because I could tell you about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, right? I could tell you about these people, right? Like we know the names of who the Nazis executed. Like, we know their names. It's always funny to me how, like, these sorts of things are said, but there's no names given, there's no history given, there's no source given, there's nothing, because they're just saying this shit because it's storytelling. At the same time, Stalin decreed the first 5-year plan, which included the collectivization of agriculture, effectively ending the NEP. Collectivization gave the Soviets direct state control over Ukraine's rich agricultural resources and allowed the state to control the supply of grain for export. Grain exports would be used to fund the USSR's transformation into an industrial power. Right. Like, how communism was successful. Right? Like, I love that these guys are just straight up like, yeah, they created a superior model. Right? They got rid of the kulaks and the landlords that were strangling the productivity of Ukraine. They collectivized it, went through that process, and it was completely successful, and we admit it right here because we're too stupid to realize that's what we're doing. The majority of rural Ukrainians who were independent, small-scale, or subsistence farmers, he's talking about the kulaks right here. I love how much they try to downplay who the kulaks were. Right? And I'm sure they're super going to mention the Civil War, and I'm sure they're going to mention how the kulaks burnt the crops and murdered their own cattle, right? I'm sure that's going to happen. They were forced to surrender their land. Yeah, just how, like, Lincoln went down to the South, right? They were forced to relinquish their slaves. No! Won't someone please think of the Confederacy? Like, if you just ignore what was going on in the region and you just pretend like these are just like innocent farmers, I'm just taking my hoe and working the land, right? Then you can say what you like. They were forced to surrender their land, livestock, and farming tools. I say that Stalin went easy on them, if you ask me, and work on collective farms as laborers. Oh no! Oh no! The landlords that were enslaving and creating a system of wage slavery were forced to, you guys, work on the farms as laborers. Oh no. Historians have recorded about 4,000 local rebellions against collectivization, taxation, terror, and violence by Soviet authorities in the early 1930s. So if we say that in a different frame, right? Historians have recorded about 4,000 local rebellions against anti-slavery legislation by the Confederacy. Right? Like, that's essentially the position that I'm reading here. The Soviet secret police and the Red Army ruthlessly suppressed these protests from the Confederacy. Sure. Tens of thousands of farmers were arrested for participating in anti-Soviet activities, shot or deported to labor camps. Right. Like, we know what Confederates are like. The wealthy and successful farmers who opposed collectivization were labeled by kulaks by Soviet propaganda. So now they're wealthy, successful farmers. Okay, great. Well, we're actually talking about the kulaks now. Finally, the Confederacy, right? They were declared enemies of the state, right? Like how Lincoln declared the Confederacy an enemy of the state. And to be eliminated as a class. Yep, that's the whole point of the Marxist project, is to eliminate capitalists as a class. That's the entire point completely, because they act like kulaks act, which is like psychopathic slavers. The elimination of the so-called kulaks was an integral part of collectivization, correct? It served 3 purposes: as a warning to those who oppose collectivization. Yeah, I should hope so, right? Like, you round up Confederates, right? It should be a warning for those who are slavers, right? As a means to transfer confiscated lands to the collective farms, okay? And as a means to eliminate village leadership. I mean, if your village leader is a Confederate type or a kulak, then great, off you go. Thus, the secret police and militia brutally stripped kulaks not only of their lands, but also their homes and personal belongings, systematically deporting them to the far regions of the USSR or executing them. Great. Like, I really need you guys to understand, right? Really need you guys to understand. I'm sitting here going, good. I hope they did. Absolutely. Positive. Thumbs up. Great. All of this sounds awesome. None of this supports the idea that they intentionally created a famine. Yeah, pretty sure the troll already left. Yeah, now I'm just doing this for my own fun. Right? I'm just doing this for my own fun, Twin Tower. We're almost done. Right? Like, these people are fucking jokes. Like, this is a fucking joke. Right? Like, they're literally defending, like, Confederates. They're literally defending people who are like outright slavers and just being like, these upstanding private citizens who never did anything wrong in their lives whatsoever. And then in the end, it just is like, okay, but what does that have to do with about a famine? Oh. Ukraine, with its history of resistance to the Soviet rule, again, second largest ethnic group to fight alongside the Soviets, was a threat to the Soviet regime, which is why they were the second largest ethnic group to fight along the Soviets. Fearing that opposition to his policies in Ukraine could intensify and possibly lead to Ukraine's secession from the Soviet Union, Stalin set unrealistically high grain quotas. Those quotas were accomplished by other draconian... Again, like, source. Like, oh, is that true? Then we should see Stalin saying it, right? Where's the quote? No? Oh, then it's just a story. In August of 1932, the decree of 5 stalks of grain stated that anyone, even a child, caught taking any produce from a collective field could be shot or imprisoned for stealing socialist property. At the beginning of 1933, about 500... So, literally, you just finished telling the story of the Civil War that the Confederates fought against. Yeah, they're going to pass a piece of legislation to say if these guys show up and start stealing property. Like, what kind of dumbass world do you live in? Like, what kind of dumbass world do you live in where you're like, yeah, we fought the Confederates in a war, and then we're just not going to pass a piece of legislation that says, yeah, if you come and steal property, like if you come and steal shit, Confederates. It's like, oh, okay. Like, goddamn, man. Like, you just got to be, like, brain dead to go along with this shit. And again, this is all just shade throwing. Like, what does this have to do? What does any of this have to do? As famine escalated... Okay, so now we're talking about the famine again. Okay, great. So how did any of this actually cause the famine? What were the causes of the famine? Oh, you don't actually say. Right? All you know is that there was a famine. So you throw some shade at the Soviets... Don't actually provide any sources or information, probably because there isn't any. As famine escalated, growing numbers of farmers left their villages in search of food outside of Ukraine, right? As famines do. Directives sent by Stalin and Molotov in January prevented them from leaving. Can I see these directives? Right? Because if the idea is like, hey, we need these guys to continue being farmers... Right? Hey, we understand that it's a crisis, but we can't just have people abandoning their posts. Like, we still need farmers. We still need people doing that job. To further ensure that Ukrainian farmers did not leave their villages to seek food in the cities, and I mean, again, it's a famine, right? So what do you think's going on? You think that there's lots of food over here? The Soviet government started a system of internal passports, which were denied to farmers. Like, did they? You've already told a whole bunch of shit up here. Like, did they? I'd love to see that. Oh, here we go. To ensure the new laws were strictly enforced, groups of activists organized by the Communist Party, as described by historian Clarence Manning. The work of these special commissions and brigades was marked by the utmost severity. They entered the villages and made the most thorough searches of the houses and barns of every peasant. Right, because they just fucking fought a war. I don't know why this doesn't play. I don't know why we're supposed to just sit here and be like, oh yeah, they fought a war, but it's over now. Right? That these people are completely 100% trustworthy, even though there was definitely a war that was fought. They dug up the earth and broke up the walls of the building and stoves to hide their last handfuls of food. I mean, again, real nice storytelling. Like, I said it before and I just got to say it again. Like, they're trying to source this kind of stuff. These are their sources, right? That they'll say stuff like, they'll say stuff like, come on. Directives sent by Stalin and Molotov. Oh, okay, so if we have directives sent by Stalin and Molotov, then we should have a directive that says our intention is to do a famine, right? That should be the directive that they sent. I'll admit, this is the highest level. Like, this is actually from a university, but this is pretty embarrassing, right? Like, where is Stalin saying out loud in front of people, the way that Churchill did in regards to the Bengali, our objective is to commit a genocide against the Ukrainian people. Our objective is to starve these people out. Where is that? Like, you've got these directives, you've got these sources, you've got this stuff, but just nothing. Like, just nothing. Just a bunch of people who have convinced themselves that it's true. So, good try, good effort, right? Keep swinging. But we're going to move on. Yeah, Holodomor is like the Uyghur genocide. Sources, trust me, bro, yeah. They're citing Timothy Snyder. He's a historian who downplayed the German Nazism, made Russia look worse. Many historians rebuke him. Yeah. A politicized famine. Who knew that could happen? Yeah, my poor South African farmers. Yeah. They whipped out the My Holodomor when John was talking about MAID. Yeah, exactly. Content, what are the primary sources in this story? So some intellectual from a college is telling a story. Yeah, John, find the primary sources. Exactly. Like, you should be able to... And it really should be clear. Like, you don't need to create this story, right? Like, you don't need a story. Like, if you're going to show me that it's a genocide, if you're going to show me that, then you don't need this big fucking story. You don't need this goddamn huge history lesson in which you valorize Confederates, right? You don't need to do that shit. You know what you should do? Find the quote from Joseph Stalin where he stood up in front of the communists and said, the rats in Ukraine need to be purged. They are a subspecies that need to be cleansed from our land. Like, why can't you do that? Because it didn't happen. So if your claim is that they organized intentionally a systemic genocide, then you should be able to show clear evidence of it from the people. Right? Yeah, this is it. I didn't even finish it. Right? Raphael Lemkin. Who gives a shit about Raphael Lemkin? Right? Where's Stalin talking about it? Lemkin's ideas on genocide. Who gives a shit about this guy? Who gives a fuck at all? Leading historians such as James Mace, Robert Conkers, Timothy Snyder, who we've already gone over, right? Basically just like Holocaust denier. Like Anne Applebaum. Anne Applebaum. I've talked pretty thoroughly about Anne Applebaum. Like, straight up, like, this is the most embarrassing shit. Yeah, even today, authorities of the Russian Federation admit that there were famines, but refuse to acknowledge the deliberate nature of the famine. Yeah, because there wasn't deliberately done. Like, in addition to the Soviet denial, foreign journalists stationed in the USSR largely ignored it. Right, because nobody was talking about it. Right? Because when you commit to an actual, real, serious famine on purpose, the way Churchill did, you talk about it. Right? Anyway. Like, this is This is embarrassing. Anne Applebaum is a journalist, quote unquote journalist, who published something called The Red Famine. She published a book that was just torn to shreds by a fellow from the University of West Virginia. Somebody tried to put it in front of me as like, look, Anne Applebaum's Red Famine, that proves it. And the guy from West Virginia was literally like, she doesn't source evidence for this. There's no evidence for this. She just says this. This is just said. This is just said. This is just said. She purports to understand what people were thinking during this period of time, but provides no evidence for it. There is no evidence for this. There's no evidence for this. In fact, I have evidence that counters this claim completely. Like, he literally tore her to pieces. And so if you're going to use Anne Applebaum in this, then I don't think you're credible as a thinker. I think that what has happened here is that the University of Minnesota has a College of Liberal Arts section where they talk about the Holocaust primarily and genocide studies, and they have a 2-pager on the Holodomor that's probably funded by Nazis that's giving them lots of money to have it here, right? And then when you actually go through the story, because that's all it is, you realize pretty quickly that it's fucking nonsense. Like, straight up, like, this is fucking nonsense. Show me Joseph Stalin talking about the intentional famine that he tried to do, the way that Churchill talked about the intentional famine that he inflicted against the Bengali. Like, there's a primary source. Fuck your stupid, dumbass historians. Fuck your stupid, dumbass, quote-unquote journalists. Fuck that nonsense. Show me Joseph Stalin saying, Ukrainian people are rats and we should purge them, the way that Churchill did. It's a real straightforward ask. Should be easy to find. Anyway, I'm moving on. Yeah, I think the Soviets were so inept they proved communism never works, but apparently the Holodomor was carried out in a way of massively successful conspiracy. Exactly. Like, oh, the Soviets were so stupid that communism failed, but they pulled this off without even talking about it. Not even a scrap. All right. Good opportunity to say like, share, subscribe. Hit those bells, hit those whistles, do all the stuff. So now we are turning, in the last hour, as I have been doing, to the Mandate for Leadership 2025. Promise number 4. If you'll recall, we've already gone through promise number 3. Right? Defend our nation's sovereignty, borders, and bounty against global threats, where they outright call for war against China because they're Nazis. Dismantle the administrative state and return self-governance to the American people. This was where they straight out said that climate change, that they are standing against God, basically, where they essentially said that we prefer the power of man against the power of God. And then, number 1, restore the family as the centerpiece of American life and protect our children, where their policy solutions were things like enslave women and ban pornography. So, on to number 4. This absolutely, totally fucking wild document that is pretty fascist in its outset. Promise number 4. Secure our God-given individual right to enjoy the blessings of liberty. The Declaration of Independence famously asserted the belief of America's founders that all men are created equal and endowed with God-given rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's the pursuit of happiness, that is central to America's heroic experiment in self-government. When the founders spoke of pursuit of happiness, what they meant might be understood today in essence, pursuit of blessedness. These guys are such fucking losers. Pursuit of blessedness. Because Jesus Christ. That is, an individual must be free to live as his creator ordained, but you deny the works of your creator. So why should we take you seriously? To flourish Our Constitution grants each of us I got to talk more about that, actually. These guys love to talk about the Creator, but they completely deny the works of their Creator, right? That these people look at a trans person, and instead of saying, well, that is the work of my Creator, I might not understand the work of my Creator, but here is the work of my Creator in their infinite imagination. That certainly the imagination of my Creator supersedes my imagination. And so when I encounter something in reality that goes beyond the limits of my own imagination and I struggle with that, that is not for me to condemn the works of my Creator. That is for the Creator to say to me, you need to expand your imagination further to meet the merit and meet the standard to be able to judge the works of your Creator. And they don't. They don't. They look at a trans person, they look at climate change, they look at all this kind of stuff, and they go, oh, it's an abomination against the Lord. Who created your thing? Who created it? Like, these people are frauds. It's really obvious that they're frauds. Their positions are embarrassing. Shockingly embarrassing. We got a fellow retired 401k chatter. China's on the rise. Number one country in the world. Looks like, my man. Looks like. Hard to deny. That is, an individual must be free to live as his Creator ordained, to flourish. Our Constitution grants each of us the liberty to do not what we want, but what we ought. Because we know what we ought to do. Because we got a book that was written 2,000 years ago. This pursuit of the good life is found primarily in family, marriage, children, Thanksgiving dinners, and the like. Like, tell me you have never read the Bible without telling me you've never read the Bible. Like, read Ecclesiastes. Read Ecclesiastes, you fucking frauds. Many find happiness through their work. There's some Ecclesiastian stuff right there. Think of dedicated teachers who we defund. Or healthcare professionals, who we defund. Entrepreneurs, who we overtax and then give money to Jeff Bezos. Or plumbers, throwing themselves into their business. Anyone who sees a job well done as a personal reward. Religious devotion and spirituality are the greatest sources of happiness around the world. Like, straight up, who gives a shit about your religious devotion and spirituality policy document for the United States government? Still others find themselves happiest in their local volunteer communities of friends, their neighbors, their civic or charitable work. And still others, such as these people, find happiness in enforcing suffering on other people, in enslaving people, and inflicting their pedophilia against their children on Jeffrey Epstein's island. The American Republic was founded on principles prioritizing and maximizing individuals' rights to live their best life, or to enjoy what the framers called the blessings of liberty. It's this radical equality, liberty for all, except black people and people of color and trans people, of course, not just of rights, but of authority, that the rich and powerful has hated about democracy in America since 1776. These guys are dumb. These dumb. They represent America's audacity in insisting that we don't need them to tell us how to live. That's what we're here for, is to tell other people how to live. It's this inalienable right of self-direction, of each person's opportunity to direct himself or herself and his or her community to the good that the ruling class disdains. With the Declaration, don't you guys, literally 2 points ago, these guys are like, ban pornography. It's a stain. Women don't have the choice to choose. Women making choices about their own autonomy and their own body is wrong. Each person's opportunity to direct himself or herself and his or her community. Got it. Not contradictory at all. With the Declaration and Constitution, our nation's founders handed to us the means with which to preserve this right. Abraham Lincoln wrote of the Declaration as an apple of gold in a silver frame, the Constitution. So must the next conservative president look to these documents when the elites mount their next assault on liberty. Left to our own devices, the American people rejected European monarchy and colonialism just as we rejected slavery, second-class citizenship for women, mercantilism, socialism, Wilsonian globalism, fascism, communism, and today, wokeism. Wow. These guys are like, this is brilliant. Like, we didn't so much reject communism as had it beat out of us. Like, there was a period of time where if you were a communist, you got blacklisted and you went to jail. Fascists got to be imported freely, though, by the CIA, right? To the left, these assertions of patriotic self-assurance are just so many signs of our moral depravity and intellectual inferiority. Proof that, in fact, we need a ruling elite making decisions for us. But the next conservative president should be proud, not ashamed of Americans' unique culture of social equality and ordered liberty. After all, the countries where Marxist elites have won political and economic power are all weaker, poorer, and less free for it. You think China is weaker than it was before Marxism? You think it's poorer since before Marxism? Pretty embarrassing, frankly. The United States remains the most innovative and upwardly mobile society in the world. What a fucking joke. Governments should stop trying to substitute its own preferences for those of the people. And the next conservative president should champion the dynamic genius of free enterprise against the grim miseries of elite-directed socialism. The promise of socialism, communism, Marxism, progressivism, fascism, whatever name it chooses, is simple. So these guys are like stupid to the point of being like I don't know how they wrote this document. Socialism and fascism are the same things. Got it. Like, you're dumb, illiterate morons. On the face of it, like just nakedly. Government control of the economy can ensure equal outcomes for all people. I mean, fascism never made that claim, right? Like, it outright was about creating a subclass. The problem is that it has never done so. There is no such thing as the government. But you guys just had like a whole point about what you're calling, like, they just said, they're not calling it the deep state. I forget what term they used, but they definitely called it like the deep state, right? Yeah, that's why Western politicians are trying to take it down. You're right, man. You're right. Like, so there's no such thing as the government, but we really want to take down the government. There are just people who work for the government and wield its power, and who, at almost every opportunity, wield it to serve themselves first and everyone a distant second. So there is no body. There's just a bunch of cells that come together. This is not a failing of one nation or socialist party, but inherent in human nature. Oh, okay. So what's with the condemnations then? Right? Like, it doesn't look like your problem was with communism, Marxism, progressivism, or even fascism. Of course, not fascism for you guys. Because it's all human nature, right? Like, it's all just human nature. Because you guys are the arbiters of what is or is not human nature. Nighttime satellite images of the Korean peninsula famously show the free market South lit up. You mean the wasteful South, just burning fossil fuels to light up nothing. With homes, businesses, and cities electrified from coast to coast. By contrast, communist North Korea is almost completely dark because they don't burn fossil fuels for nothing. Except for the small dot of the capital city, Pyongyang, where a psychotic dictator and his cronies live. Who actually bombed the shit out of Korea? How many people did the United States actually massacre in Korea? Oh, was it 20% of the populace? Oh, and they leveled every structure in North Korea. Wow. These are very serious people who we should definitely take very seriously. The same phenomenon is on display in the infuriating fact that 4 of the 6 richest countries in the United States are suburbs of Washington, D.C., a city infamous for its lack of native productive industries. Like, I love these guys, man. They're just constantly waffling between, like, communism is bad, but capitalism is also bad, but capitalism is good. But communism's the problem and can't do anything right. But capitalism is the worst, but good. Like, what no theory does to a motherfucker, right? We see the same corruption expressed on an individual level whenever billionaire climate activists, of course, it's got to be the billionaire climate activists, who want to outlaw carbon fuel transportation. Like, who are these billionaire climate activists? There's a lot of billionaire climate activists around. Who? What's their names? What have they done recently? Want to outlaw carbon fuel transportation, fly to A-list conferences on their private jets, or when COVID-19 shut down politicians like former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and California Governor Gavin Newsom were caught at the hair salon or dining at fancy restaurants after moralizing about how everyone else must stay at home and forgo such luxuries during the pandemic. Like literally the worst thing that you're going to peg with Nancy Pelosi is a hair salon visit. Got it. Dude, these guys are clowns. Like, this is so fucking clownish. For socialists who are almost always well-to-do... What? What? What the fuck are you talking about? Socialism is not a means of equalizing outcomes, but a means of accumulating power. I mean... Yeah, like that's the thing. Like, this whole equalizing outcomes thing actually comes out of like Jordan Peterson and that ridiculous clown show, right? Like the equality of outcomes. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of Marxism. Marxism is about accumulating power. It's about accumulating power in order to increase productive forces for the benefit of the workers. Correct. Well done. You just say it like it's spooky. They never get around to helping anyone else. China literally lifted 800 million people out of poverty, my man. Like, these guys are clowns. Just embarrassing clowns. The only reason they're not just completely mock-worthy is that they're extremely dangerous. Right? Like, these guys are going to do a McCarthy. They're going to do a big Red Scare, right? Because they know that they have an inferior product. The Soviet Empire was a social and economic failure. Literally first people into space, like industrialized the nation in a single generation. But okay, economic failure, got it. North Korea, despite the opulence of its tyrants, is one of the poorest nations in the world after we bombed it and murdered 20% of its population and leveled all of its cities to the ground. Cuba is so corrupt that people regularly risk their lives to escape to Florida on rafts, because of the systemic poverty that we maintain through our sanction regime. Venezuela was once the richest nation in South America. Today, after a decade of after a Marxist dictator who was completely elected by the people took over, 94% of Venezuelans live in poverty. The UN says the number one problem they're facing today is sanctions. Even socialist Senator Bernie Sanders, home of Vermont, was forced to repeal the state's single-payer healthcare system just 3 years after creating it. Yeah, because I'm sure there were no external factors involved in that were completely tied to capitalism, right? Like, I love that these guys keep pointing at things and making accusations while completely omitting their own history. Because I mean, that's how you got to do it, right? That's how you got to do it. You gotta basically argue with reality and pretend like it doesn't exist, and then you can be right. In every case, socialist elites promised that if only they could direct the economy, everything would be better, and that's usually correct. Very quickly, everything got worse after the CIA came in and they did a bombing campaign. You're right about that. In socialist nation after socialist nation, the only way the government could keep its disgruntled people in line was to surveil and terrorize them. You guys know about the NSA? Right, the largest surveillance system that exists in the world. Yeah, well, I guess we're socialist. By contrast, in countries with a high degree of economic freedom, elites are not in charge because everyone is in charge. This is total clown shoes shit, man. It's really hard for me to believe that these guys actually believe this. Like, it's so clownish. A man with $1 billion has the same amount of power as a man with $10. They're the same. Free market, people work, build, invest, save, and create according to their own interests and in service to the common good for their fellow citizens. What a, naive, stupid way of looking at capitalism. You've actually got to be stupid to believe this. There is a reason why the private economy hews to the maxim, the customer is always right, while government bureaucracies are notoriously user-unfriendly. Just as there is a reason why private charities are cheerful and government welfare systems are not. Jesus fucking Christ. I gotta read this one again, man. This is crazy that these people are actually saying this shit. There is a reason why the private economy hews to the maxim, the customer is always right. Because, yeah, planned obsolescence doesn't exist. The customer definitely wants to be poisoned by Roundup, right? Corporations are so friendly. While government bureaucracies are notoriously user-unfriendly. Yet notoriously user-unfriendly to fascists like you guys, right? Absolutely. Abso-fucking-lutely. This is more just like the kulaks were good, actually. Just as there is a reason why private charities are cheerful and government welfare systems are not. Private charities are cheerful, eh? So as long as you're ha 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 ha, as long as you're a laughing clown while you stab people to death, it's all great. It's not because grocery store clerks and PTA moms are good and federal bureaucracies are bad. It's because private enterprise, for profit or non-profit, must cooperate to give, to succeed. That's so stupid. I can't even be insulted because I think they believe it. I think that they are this stupid. They've never heard about monopolies. They've never heard about wage suppression. They don't care. Yet their heads are full of raw biscuits. Yeah, that is a phenomenal insult, Content. It's just got biscuits in their heads, right? So the American people take back their sovereignty, constitutional authority, respect for the family and communities. They should also take back their right to pursue the good life. The next president should promote pro-growth economic policies that spur new jobs and investment. Yeah, because no politician ever has said, I'll create jobs. No politician's ever done that. Higher wages. Oh, so now we care about higher wages. Even though, literally the antithesis of corporate power is higher wages. Literally every wage increase has happened through government intervention. Literally every single one. Why? Because corporations do not want to raise wages. They're very clear about that. And productivity. Yeah, I'm sure that these two things are definitely going to be linked in the capitalist world. Yes, that agenda should include overdue tax and regulatory reform, but it should go further and include antitrust enforcement against corporate monopolies. These guys are clowns, man. What do they think? So they know about corporate monopolies, but it's because private enterprises must cooperate to give to succeed. So over here, it's because private enterprises must cooperate to give to succeed. But we're gonna do enforcement against corporate monopolies. So, which is it? Is it that market-based systems eventually devolve into monopoly, or is it that private businesses must cooperate to give to succeed? Which is it? You can't do both, right? Oh, but you wanna. Okay. It should promote educational opportunities outside the woke-dominated system of public schools. So private schools, right? And universities, including trade schools, apprenticeship programs, and student loan alternatives that fund student dreams instead of Marxist academies. We want billionaires to be able to accredit people. That's what that is. We want Elon Musk to be able to say this person's degree from Elon Musk University or from PragerU University is just as good as someone's Harvard diploma, right? Just as important as expanding opportunities for workers and small businesses, the next president should crack down on the crony capitalist corruption that enables America's largest corporations to profit through political influence rather than competitive enterprise and customer satisfaction. Analogous pro-growth reforms for America's voluntary civil society are also in order. America is not an economy. It is a country. Economic freedom is not the only important freedom. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and the freedom to assemble also represent key components of the American promise. Today, in addition to the problem of big tech censorship, we see speakers at universities shouted down, parents investigated and arrested for attempting to speak at school board meetings, and donors to conservative causes harassed and intimidated. The next conservative president must defend our First Amendment rights. Like, all of this is happening in capitalism, guys. And then these guys are like, the problem's communism, fascism, communism, fascism. Best effort. Dude, just say maximum effort. Just go for it. Deadpool. Ultimately, the left does not believe that all men are created equal. They think they are special. They certainly don't think all people have an unalienable right to pursue the good life. They think only for themselves and have such a right along with a moral responsibility to make decisions for everyone else. They don't think any citizen, state, business, church, or charity should be allowed any freedom until they first bend the knee. So, if Marxists are all about power for themselves, then why do they keep aligning themselves with the weakest people in the society? Just a question. Like, why do they keep advocating for the poor? Why do they keep advocating for the weakest people in the society if their whole goal is just power? Oh. This book, this agenda, the entire Project 2025 is a plan to unite the conservative movement and the American people against elite rule and woke culture warriors. Our movement has not been united in recent years, and our country has paid the price. In the past decade, though, the breakdown of the family, the rise of China, the Great Awakening, big tech's abuses, and the erosion of constitutional accountability in Washington have rendered these divisions not just inconvenient, but politically suicidal. Every hour the left directs federal policy and elite institutions, our sovereignty, our Constitution, our families, and our freedom are a step closer to disappearing. Conservatives have just 2 years and one shot to get this right. With enemies at home and abroad, there is no margin of error. Time is running short. If we fail, the fight for the very idea of America may be lost. But we should take this small window of opportunity we have left to act with courage and confidence, not despair. The last time our nation and movement were so near defeat, we rallied together behind a great leader and great ideas, transcended our differences, rescued our nation, and changed the world. It's time to do it again. Now, as then, we know who we are fighting and what we are fighting for our republic, our freedom, and for each other. The next conservative president will enter office on January 20th, 2025, with a simple choice: greatness or failure. It will be a daunting test, but no more so than every generation of Americans has faced and passed. The conservative promise: represents the best effort of the conservative movement in 2023 and the next conservative president's last opportunity to save our republic. That was the introduction. Yep, choose American exceptionalism. That's right. That's right, man. Modern Christianity is like the alien that burst out of the chest of the old Christianity. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what you're reacting to, Cotton, but yeah, I'm with you. Look, John, we just want our excuse to commit Nanking 2.0. Is that too much to ask? Yeah. Everyone is in charge, yeah. Venezuela is better off now with the U.S. sanctions than it was before Chavez came to power. 12% that reaped the benefits were the ones doing better before Chavez. Exactly. Yeah. Projection. Yeah. John, if you care for the poor and the needy, you just envy the rich. Oh, is that how that works? Is that how that works? Well, guys, tune in tomorrow while we plunge into Section 1, Taking the Reins of Government. Dude, I love the way these guys have written this thing. It's just so, like, dramatic. And I think the thing that I really got to point out, like, if this is their introduction, this is their groundwork, right? This is like the guiding principle of all of this kind of stuff. These guys have no solutions at all, right? They've got no solutions at all. The conservative promise is a big wet fart. It is absolutely nothing. And that's the thing that I like, outside of the overt, obvious, like, anti-communism and the fascism. Like, they have no solutions. Their solutions literally are work harder. That's it. Yeah, fun fact, the person who stops doing busting monopolies is Reagan. Amazing. All right, guys, I'm going to end it here. A little bit early, but always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.